Welcome back, everybody, to another Rattlesnake TV debate night. Today we have got Made by JimBob, Aleleazar Perez, Evan James, and Adam Khan, and we're going to be debating the topic of Christianity versus progressivism, what is better for society. If you guys would like to find our debaters, all of their links are going to be just below. Few pre-show notes before we get into it. After introducing themselves, each debater will get to make an opening statement of up to 5 minutes. They don't need to take the entire 5 minutes. They can yield their time if they'd like, but they get up to 5 minutes. We will read out some super chats before getting into open dialogue after the opening statements, and the open dialogue will be about 90 minutes or so, more if we need. At the end, if we have sufficient interests, we will take callers. So if you guys would like to be a caller and call into the show and pose any challenges to any of our debaters today, then you'll have your chance to ask whatever questions you would like. Just message me on Twitter at JakeRattleSNK. That's JakeRattleSNK. We're going to drop those links in the chat as we go. As the moderator, I will only intervene if the debaters are talking over each other too much, or if we need to get back on topic, or if we need clarification on anything as we go. At any point, the debaters can appeal to the moderator, being myself. Super chats will be put on screen as they go. Like we said, after the opening statements, we'll read out about 5 and above. And then towards the end, depending on the volume of the super chats, we will read out most likely 10 and above, but we could bring it up to 20 if there is too many of them and if we're running out of time. So guys, I'm not going to be monetizing this debate during the live, but as you know, I will need my palms greased in order to keep on doing that for your convenience. So feel free to join the grift. Finally, you guys are going to see that there's a poll up in the chat. Very important that everybody gets their votes in the poll, in the chat. What do you think is better for society? Christianity, progressivism, or undecided? And then at the end, we're going to run the exact same poll and we're going to see who was able to change more minds in today's debate. That's the idea, guys. We want to be making the most convincing arguments possible for our side to try and change the most minds. And hopefully the poll will reflect that. There is always a winner in Rattlesnake TV debate nights. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, let's let the games begin.
And now, for the thousands in attendance, let's get ready to rumble!
All right, gentlemen, I am going to kick it off for some quick introductions. And then after the quick introductions, we will get into our opening statements. So starting off with JimBob, introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Made by JimBob. My channel is Made by JimBob. I am a satirical cartoonist, a weekly contributor for the Washington Examiner, and I'm an online troll debater commentator.
And Aleleazar.
Yeah, hi, my name is Aleleazar. You can just call me Easy. It's easier to say. But I do political street debates, so I particularly go out into liberal cities face-to-face with people and debate people live. So I'm excited to do this on the internet, first time with some other good debaters.
And Evan James, who's helped me coordinate the liberal side. I appreciate that, brother. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Evan. I go on all social media, Evan JMEZ. I just do political and social commentary on TikTok. I've also appeared in several of the Jubilee videos, including the most recent Surrounded episode.
And Adam Khan.
Hey, I'm Adam Khan. I'm mostly on TikTok, so if you want to find me, you can just look up Adam Khan. That also has my link tree with all my YouTube and all the other stuff. I've also been on a couple of Jubilee Surrounded episodes, one Jubilee Middle Ground, and I do political commentary. I consider myself a progressive pragmatist.
Okay, gentlemen. Well, we're going to start off with JimBob, and then we're going to go into Evan, Aleleazar, Adam for the opening statement. So we'll mix it up a little bit and then we'll go in the reverse order at the end. So whoever starts will get the last word at the end, okay? So JimBob, starting with you, my man, your opening statement, you have got 5 minutes on the clock.
All right, thank you. So yeah, the topic is progressivism versus Christianity. When I hear the term progressivism, I'm pretty much asking a question about the word progress. To my knowledge, progress is a description of where you are between point A and point B. It doesn't tell you what the goal is or where the destination is. It's a map. Progressivism seems to be a map where everyone has their own truth. This ambiguity of direction is what makes it so appealing to young idealists. You simply sell a set of nice sounding platitudes guised as virtue, and you'll always have some young converts. You've all heard the bumper sticker slogans: equality, inclusivity, LGBT rights, women's rights, love is love, your truth and my truth, and many, many more. What they're really doing is appealing to the emotion of the youngest idealists, calling it virtue. The problem is the progressive ideology has no moral duties or obligations. It's just pursuing your own fleshly desires, your own interests based on your own preferences. The entire paradigm is based on individual pursuits, material desires, and preferences. The ideology is also based on another false assumption, which is the assumption that human beings are sort of interchangeable cogs seeking some sort of virtuous equilibrium. The problem is reality is fundamentally hierarchical, and I would argue it's fundamentally patriarchal. A functioning society like a business or a family adheres ultimately to some sort of hierarchy. So seeking some sort of equality above all to even manage it would be to adhere to something that's hierarchy, that's not equal. With that said, case in point, the plethora of rights that the progressive advocates for in the name of equality require primary force of men to defend and enforce. So the application or the any progress, so to speak, toward equality requires inequality of force. That is to say, equality requires inequality. So they're in a performative contradiction. The progressive has a much larger issue with their philosophy that we'll get into many more throughout the debate, which is the question for my opponents. I'd like you to answer this during the debate at some point. If a secular progressive came to prefer the Christian ethical system without the belief in God, how would you argue against it if they were a progressive? Could you actually say they weren't a progressive? Now, for my paradigm, I could say they're not really a Christian, but I'm not sure you could do the same and say they're not really a progressive. How much time, Jake? Minute and a half left?
You got another 2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay. So let's get into the topic of the debate is what's better, right? Well, we're going to have to find some common ground on defining what better means. But I would argue right off the bat that a society itself requires human beings. And if the Christian paradigm, even if it wasn't true, advocates for a deontological, that is to say, it's an obligation and a duty, a moral duty, a good to procreate, the Christian already has a leg up as far as paradigm versus paradigm. From the progressive view, there is no obligation to procreate. So the Christians are actually producing, and this is statistically true, Christians, among other theists, produce more people than progressives. The progressives merely rely on finding our children and indoctrinating them. So they don't really need to produce, but they don't have an obligation to produce. And so the question is a better society, is a prerequisite for a society at all to reproduce? Among those problems with reproduction, they advocate for the LGBTQ paradigm and practice, which is a reproductive dead end. I'm not certain how my opponents are going to tell me how homosexuality and all of these other fetishes are advantageous to society at all. What do they provide society on net balance? I'm not sure what those things are, other than feeling good, my feelings. So again, I'll close by saying the entire progressive philosophy is based on feelings and preferences. There is no direction. They couldn't tell you where we're getting to. And the reason that it constantly changes is it's based on preferences. So preferences 1 year for progressives would be seen as glorified. And you've seen this trend where the next couple of years, what was glorified in the progressive movement is now heresy. And so it's always changing. It's in flux. There's no direction. They couldn't tell us where we should take society. The Christian paradigm can tell you that. I'll yield the rest of my time.
All right. And Evan, over to you. No obligation to take the 5 minutes, but you've got 5 minutes on the clock.
Okay, great. So Wikipedia defines progressivism as a left-leaning political philosophy reform movement that seeks to advance the human condition through social reform, primarily based on purported advancements in social organization, science, and technology. Advancement in this case would be to rectify injustices and dispose of any antiquated ideas that do not serve the interest of individuals and society at large. Progressivism encourages pluralism, as both rigorous debate and empiricism are key drivers in determining societal change. Christianity and progressivism are not actually mutually exclusive, and maybe that can help answer one of the questions that I heard earlier. A progressive society recognizes where religion can be useful in providing individuals with purpose and building community, but similarly, progressives can also recognize religion can be used as a repressive force and as such can be harmful in those given contexts. Religions of all kinds have been used as a liberation tool by those under subjugation and as a justification bludgeon by the subjugators themselves. Progressivism fundamentally is a better philosophy and way of organizing society due to its adaptability and understanding that variation between individuals, cultures, and communities require different approaches in serving those interests. Something that Christianity cannot account for is its lack of providing outcome data in terms of how it's effectful in all societies in a universal sense. And do you want me to respond to any of the claims made, or would you prefer I just do sort of an
You can respond if you've got your 5 minutes on the clock, man, so you can do whatever you want with that 5 minutes.
Okay. I would say that much of what we heard in terms of, for example, procreation, while yes, procreation is necessarily something that is going to be required in order to, keep a society thriving, it isn't actually clear that in implementing Christianity across a society that doesn't already have that would advance further procreation, or how Christianity can be implemented whatsoever. In terms of what another interest with that societies require to flourish is their interest in human happiness. And we see across empirical data that some of the happiest, self-reported happiest societies around us are amongst the most secular. And those ones, not coincidentally, are also some of the best at rectifying things like poverty within their own nation. And I'll yield the rest of my time.
All right, Aleleazar, over to you. Guys, we've got 2 more opening statements, and then we're going to read out some super chats if you want to get them in. Last chance. And also make sure to put your vote in the poll in the chat. Go on, Aleleazar.
Yeah, I also wanted to say, guys, nothing is personal. It's all just fun. I want to make sure that it's good for the audience too. So whatever I say, it's not personal. But ladies and gentlemen, today our opponents will attempt to convince you that progressivism is inherently good and necessary, while arguing that Christianity is inherently evil and oppressive. Oppressive to whom, you may ask? Well, our fellow liberal buddies will make claims that Christianity, using their patriarchal system, has probably enslaved women since the beginning of time. They are the same ones that are oppressing LGBTQ folks, stripping their rights away, and completely dehumanizing their very existence. But what does progressivism itself lead to? If we were to grant to our opponents that Christianity was false and people were believing in something that was false, what would becoming a progressive society lead to? For some context, it was the progressives who have pushed ideologies such as eugenics, abortion, feminism, and getting women outside of the kitchen, which ultimately has led to the destruction of society. It is progressives that believe in the belief of do whatever makes you happy and live and let live, brother, because that has now led to a result, which is women think that they are men. It gives people this illusion that men can give birth. And then we sell this idea of abortions as the right to your own body and the right to make your own decisions. However, what I want the audience to pay attention to during this debate is to listen to what rights are under these people's views. So basically, they view rights as more freedom. So when they say one ought to have the right to decide what they do with their body and the right to decide if they want to be in some sort of weird relationship or the right to share their tits online, what they're conflating is rights with freedom. So every time they say rights, they actually mean more freedom. Now, if freedom is the highest virtue we ought to seek as a society, what could this possibly lead to besides a perfect utopian world? Well, they will have to concede that their ideal society will not only allow incest, abortions, public nudity, allowing one to smoke meth all day, refuse vaccine mandates, and maybe even allow one to off themselves off the face of this planet, but their worldview will glorify these actions because, after all, we're just letting people live, brother, and they're just acting upon their God-given innate human rights. Now, if they have any issues with this at all, and they choose to set any restrictions to what one can do with one's body, then we will see that what they view as rights are simply an illusion. On the other end, if they say that there are absolutely no issues with allowing those actions. And they also admit that everything is a subjective preference. Even if Christianity was false, why not just pretend it's true in order to avoid whatever the fuck it is that they believe, which is just flat out disgusting and pure evil. And in case that went over your head, let me summarize it so everyone can understand. Your morality is subjective. We will grant you that Christianity is also subjective, but under their subjective view, they will allow a 45-year-old father to pipe down his 19-year-old daughter as long as they both consent. And under Christianity, we will have restrictions that don't allow one to do whatever they wish, because as we see time and time again, giving people the option to decide whatever the fuck they want to do with their body never leads to good outcomes. Hence why we have laws. If we removed laws, the ideal utopian view they visualize would quickly become a dystopia, meaning no society at all. So it's ultimately going to come down to the paradox of freedom, where you give one so much freedom that it leads to no freedom at all. Now, our opponents, being pragmatists, meaning doing what works, will now have to explain what they view as working. Working by whose metric? Is this just an arbitrary standard that is also up to interpretation? If as a society we arrived at the conclusion that removing women's right to vote produced better outcomes for society, would they also be in favor of that? Now, who would be the oppressive one? But if believing in God, even if he wasn't real, led to substantially better outcomes in society by almost every single major metric, why not also believe that God is real in order to live a better and happier life? These are the questions that our opponents will attempt to answer over the next 2 hours. And as you will see, they will have absolutely no justification for their claims. And we are going to run circles around them as they squirm, just hoping this debate comes to an end. I hope you all enjoy. And with that, I will yield my time.
Okay, strong statement. Adam Khan, you're up, man.
Yeah, so I feel like we'll obviously delve into a lot of the specifics that were just brought up, so I don't want to spend too much time on my opening statement. I would say that I think progressivism is an ill-defined term, which it seems like everyone has a different definition for depending on the point they're trying to make. I would give a very bare-bones macro definition, which is just that I think progressivism is an iterative process through which society can evolve, self-correct. I don't think things like Christianity or religion more broadly are inherently bad. I think it depends on the means and mechanisms through which they're implemented and what specific values they're promulgating in society. So I think there are certain virtues that could be, derived from Christianity. There's certain virtues that could be derived from Hinduism, Islam, all these different religions. And I want to go back to what Evan said about pluralism. I think what's good about progressivism is it has a certain level of adaptability that allows you to incorporate positive aspects, positive values of different belief systems and sort of have an amalgamation of them in a society that has freedom. And I would say, I don't think freedom is necessarily the ultimate goal. And I think JimBob asked earlier, progress towards where? I think that's a good question that is often ill-defined, which is why some people define progressivism as identitarianism or hedonism or all these different things. And I would say that's kind of a problem. I think ideally in a progressive society, you want to create circumstances such that you are fostering environments where people, through their own free decision making, choose to live virtuous lives. So I don't think it's like this arbitrary thing where just anything that comes from freedom is inherently good. I think it's a matter of equipping people with the faculties and the understanding to pursue freedom in a way that is good. There's a good way to use freedom. There's a negative way to use freedom. Freedom comes with responsibilities as well. And I would not negate that idea. I don't dispute that fact. So I think one thing we're going to have to delve into in this conversation is probably defining our terms a little bit better, because I don't even know if Evan necessarily agrees with everything I said there. And then also I would like to, if you guys are down, eventually get into like more of a practical discussion of like, how is this actually implemented? Because with such abstract, broad topics, it is kind of easy to get bogged down in semantics and like these tunnels that really lead nowhere that's productive. But I would hope we can have a good faith conversation here, because I do think that there is some value to be gleaned from this on both sides. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say right now.
All right, cool, guys. What we're going to do is we're going to go into some cross-examination now to make sure that it's not too messy. So Aleleazar and JimBob, you guys can start with the cross-examination, and you can cross-examine the view of Evan and Adam. Before we get there, guys, I'm going to read out some super chats that we've gotten in, and then we are going to check out the polls of the initial poll results. So Jason Skull for $5 says, "Let's go, JimBob." Jonathan Dynan for $5 says, "Wow, this should be a fun and spirited debate." Completely agree with that. And then we have got Isaac Hayes for $15 says, if your truth is true to you, what makes it true to someone else? And if your truth is so-called factual, what makes it fact and not a false claim? I think we'll definitely get into that during the debate. So, guys, the results of the initial polls is heavily in favor of Christianity. I'm sure that you guys expected to be on a wave turf today. So, 92% in favor of Christianity, 2% in favor of progressivism, and 6% undecided. So, you guys have an opportunity to change some minds today. And with that, I'm going to mute myself, and JimBob and Aleleazar, you guys can start your cross-examination.
Yeah, I want to ask Adam something. That last part kind of piqued my interest. You said progressivism, the ideal is to foster an environment that allows people through their will to be virtuous, right? But you also argued that you agree with Evan, your partner, and saying that pluralism is adaptable. Well, how do you have a society with a pluralistic view of what virtues are? And after you answer that, wouldn't you advocate for a society that was more unified and cohesive with what they determined virtues were?
Sure. So just to make sure I'm understanding the question, are you saying or asking, you think that having a concrete set of virtues is mutually exclusive with pluralism?
No, I'm asking, the first question is, how do you determine what virtues are? And the second question is, if you were to choose, if you were to choose between, let's say one set of virtues rejected another set, would you prefer, your preferences, would you prefer the more cohesive standard for virtues than the pluralistic one?
Sure. So I think my understanding of progressivism is sort of that like virtues and what is good and what is supposed to happen is something that is emergent as time passes and as these different pluralistic groups interact with each other. So I think in an ideal situation, you would have an amalgamation of different, because there's a lot of common ground in practical terms when it comes to virtues, honesty, respect. Like you can come up with a hypothetical where someone thinks that like being evil and killing people is virtuous, and that maybe gets into like very abstract territory. But I think in more practical terms, when you have a pluralist society where people from different backgrounds, different belief systems are coming together, in order to exist in a society harmoniously, they have to be able to find what that lowest common denominator is, what everyone can sort of agree upon in terms of what is the way people ought to live.
Sorry to interrupt, but like if you say what's virtuous emerges out of a society can emerge, an emergent behavior could be that a dominant force uses force to take over the government and also exclude, right? Because you would agree that if isn't one way a critical path to harmonious is to excommunicate the ones who don't agree with you? Wouldn't that produce harmony?
There's plenty of examples of what you're saying happening throughout history, which is why I think it depends on the time span you're talking about. And you have to look at like what happened 10 years ago versus 5 years ago. Like what is the direction in which we are moving? There's going to be peaks and valleys, but my understanding is that like as you sort of zoom out and look at which direction are we trending in on average over a very long time horizon as a species, we're arriving at a certain point, which I think is why we have largely abolished things like slavery in the West, and we've moved towards a more egalitarian society.
So the question is, I'll ask it more directly.
Sure.
Is it virtuous then to do anything, any means possible to produce what you call harmony?
Any means possible? No, because I mean, I think like there's a lot of, the way you're phrasing the question sort of like implies certain conclusions, but like, can you give me an example of like what exactly you're asking about?
Well, I asked you what.
Can I also ask a clarifying question?
Yeah, hold on. I asked you what virtue was, and you said, well, a virtue just kind of emerges from a society. I said, if a behavior emerges from a society that has one group of dominant people, force out the ones that they call disharmony, harmony, like they just cast them out and say, you guys are incompatible. If you said virtue is what emerges to produce harmony, then harmony doesn't actually necessitate.
I mean, as a species, though, I'm not talking about a specific group of people being harmonized or working together only within a specific boundary that's being set. And I think, like, when you talk about what is virtue, as I was saying, I think it's something that is distilled, and we discover more fine ways of defining it as time goes on, because our definitions now are not going to be the same definitions a progressive from 100 years ago would have given, or 100 years before that. And I think virtue in a very broad sense is a way of conducting yourself and thinking about the world and viewing the world that is conducive to having as harmonious of a society as possible, which includes as much of the human species as possible. So I think being exclusionary is by definition going to be against how we would define that.
Okay, but let me ask you a methodology question. If there's two positions and they're equal in force and numbers inside of a society, not the world, let's say the US, And one makes a claim about where we ought to go, and another makes a claim where we ought to go, and both say they're virtuous. According to your standard, what method are you going to use to determine which one's virtuous?
Whichever ones are like most conducive to the goal which I laid out, which is having a society which has everyone using their freedom in a way that contributes to the harm. Like it's almost like a system that reinforces itself. So you want to have people behaving in a way such that society is cohesive. And if you have someone putting forward a definition of virtue that is antithetical to that, I think that would become evident.
Okay, cool. So if I want a Christian society and I want it cohesive, like you said, that's a good thing. I'm not sure how you're going to argue using force to forcefully remove anyone who's not cohesive to my paradigm.
When did I say anything about using force? Like
Well,
Evan,
well,
Evan even
like-
said Christianity and progressivism
Well,
are not mutually exclusive.
I'm saying I'm using those means, right? Because you just said, I said the hypothetical is there's an equal amount of people who are fighting for their paradigm, right, inside of a country to say take control over the government and inform their laws based on their paradigm. I said seeking harmony and cohesion. One side could say, yeah, we're seeking cohesion. The way we're going to achieve cohesion is to remove the ones who are incompatible with this cohesiveness. So
that goes against my definition of progressivism, though, which is that you want to have it be as inclusive as possible in terms of the entire human species.
But if things are incompatible, now you're not arguing for cohesion. So is it possible that
there's processes to resolve disputes, which I think in and of themselves can be very healthy and useful to hash those things out?
Are there incompatible cultures and sets of virtues?
There's certain facets of certain cultures that would be incompatible with each other. I think using broad strokes to say this culture and this culture are incompatible kind of neglects some of the nuances within each culture.
Okay.
I think it's also important to note that the goal would be to not just exclude exclude those cultures in the creation of a more harmonious society. You would want to attempt to rectify whatever ills or injustices are present within those cultures. So the goal of progressivism wouldn't just be to say this culture has maybe an incompatible way of, for example, treating gay people. Let's remove them from society. You would want to incorporate them with the goal of actually correcting whatever harmful behavior or ill that is.
But Evan, you used the word justice. It sounds like you're making the same argument as your partner here, but just moving the claim over to injustice. I'm going to ask the same question. If a one set of group of people, let's say in this case Christians, let's say the state, the U.S. is, let's just say even. Let's say there's 50% Christians and there's 50% progressives, and they disagree on what injustice is. How are you gonna through the progressive lens, which is advocating for pluralism, how are you going to reconcile that kind of difference if fundamentally the Christian disagrees with your definition, Adam, of virtue, and Evan, your definition of injustice?
Yeah, I think that there's going to be some acknowledgement of it. It sounds like what you're getting at is just the paradox of intolerance. I think there's going to be some acknowledgement that in order to create a more tolerant and inclusive society, you have to, again, attempt to rectify through both rigorous debate and empiricism on things that we do have universal agreement on. And that's not to say that those ethics are inherently objective, but we have acknowledgement that there's going to be universal interests on very basic rudimentary things like giving people, for example, just like stable income or living a more stable material life.
So what if there's a part of the society that's fighting for their system of justice, and they think it's justified for them to be nude and indecent in public? That means masturbating, let's say, more specifically in public. Do you guys take a pluralistic approach and say, no, we have to accommodate the public masturbator? He's just living his life, bro.
No, like I said earlier, I don't think just anything that is done with the use of freedom is inherently good in and of itself. It depends to what end it's being done, why it's being done, and how it impacts. Like,
would you
I want to add to what Evan was saying. When there's an overlap between groups that differ, you want to focus on that overlap, use that overlap as the foundation, and then anything that threatens that overlap and threatens the cohesion and their harmoniousness should be viewed as something that you want to try to.
Would you interrupt? Would you interrupt and intervene on the harmoniousness of a public masturbator?
Yes, if it's because I would say that public masturbation is going to be harmful
To who?
to, for example, children.
How?
Because it may encourage, for example, children to interact sexually with other adults, and that leads to exploitative practices.
Do you believe in teaching kids sexual education that's highly detailed through books?
I mean, it's going to be, the devil's going to be in the details in terms of.
Do you believe in teaching children about masturbation?
Depends on what age. Like I'd say around middle school is when you normally.
So are you okay with a public
or
masturbator? Hold on.
I think the way you
okay
teach them is pretty important, right?
Are you okay with a public masturbator then, as long as it was in front of the age that you mentioned?
No, I don't think showing masturbation.
Yeah, in a book, it's teaching.
It's
in a book or some guy in
it's a form of education.
What's the difference between a guy? He just call himself a teacher.
In which they're being
not all
presented and
forms
perceived.
What if you just call him a teacher?
Well, it would be. We would have to look at like the form of education, not all forms.
And like
of
we have to acknowledge there are social contexts that affect how people perceive and interact with things. You can't just say that a book that teaches something is the same as a dude on the subway.
Okay, what's wrong with the teacher?
And also any person who is engaging in public masturbation explicitly with the intention or even just the vulnerability of having children see that, they have something that I would find reprehensible because of the opportunities of exploitation towards children.
Okay,
and
let's take the age. Let's just do this again. Let's take the age you find it totally fine to use books and pictures to teach kids.
Well, I never say pictures.
Well,
I didn't necessarily say pictures. I think that again, and this is what I meant when I said the devil is in the details.
I'm getting details. Yeah, I'm giving details.
Okay, then what exactly do these books say, and what exactly
have you seen some of the books in some of the libraries and classes that teach explicitly through photographs, through illustration, teach kids how to masturbate, how to perform sodomy, and more, right? Are you okay with teaching kids at a certain age in schools those practices? Yes or no, under a secular view, under your progressive view? Is that progress?
I would have to look at whatever the specific illustrations are, and
a drawing of a guy jerking off. Wait.
Yeah, and I would also need to know exactly what age and what the purpose of this education is. So I think that like there's we need to have some just rudimentary education for children at, for example, maybe the age of 13 or so, to just acknowledge what masturbation is, but I'm not sure it's necessary to do any sort of illustration. So in that case, no, I don't think it's necessary.
How about would you teach homosexuality in your progressive utopia?
When you say teach, do you mean like instructing people to behave in this way, or just telling them it exists?
Let me ask you. You remember sex education, right? You're biologically you're learning about sex, right?
It's been a while, but
but would you guys include homosexual activity in the context of teaching sex biologically?
To the extent that there are homosexual people that are present in the people learning, I'd want to teach them how to safely engage in the behaviors they're probably going to engage in. That's different from saying you ought to engage in these behaviors. I think providing people with education on how things work is different than subjecting them to those experiences. Okay, so you would teach kids of 13 or over, or somewhere in there, how to properly and safely put a penis in a butthole. Is that what you're saying? If they're going to engage in it regardless, I would rather have them do it in a way that is somewhat safe rather than just willy-nilly based on the internet or something. Okay.
Right. So if, for example, if it just includes the education that, hey, wearing condoms can protect you from things like STDs, and we see a reduction of STDs because of education implementation like that, then yes.
So teaching, so from a Christian.
And I think, wait. And I think it's important to
so it's reducing good. Reducing disease is good, right?
What you are inferring, right, is that the absence of this education would lead to, for example, less overall engagement of this behavior, but you haven't actually demonstrated that. And generally, we do see that societies with comprehensive sex education and economic, for example, access to effective contraception are going to have less STDs.
So do you think it's a good thing to reduce sexually transmitted diseases, though?
Generally, yeah. I think that it's something that most people want to avoid, and as such, we should, make.
Should we teach the best way to avoid it in school?
Yeah, absolutely.
So abstinence, we should teach abstinence in high
We
school.
should teach abstinence, but we should also
Is that a
teach
progressive virtue or is that a Christian virtue?
Well, it is
It's the freedom to choose which one you want to engage in.
Is abstinence? A simple question.
Well, abstinence, not abstinence only, but you understand that. And I was just in, I don't know, school not too long ago, but they still told you that abstinence is the best and most effective way of preventing STDs. And that's, of course, the case. That's, of course, true. But you don't let that be the only form of education. You also provide effective access to contraception and ensure that if, for example, teenagers, which they do engage in sex, are going to engage in sex with each other, that they're informed on how to do it safely. They're informed about consent in order to prevent and decrease overall harm, which is going to be exploitation. And I think one thing that we may be missing is Adam and I aren't libertarians. We're progressives. We can acknowledge that just because someone is quote unquote of the age or quote unquote engaging in a free behavior, that it's not necessarily going to be conducive to the benefit of themselves or those around them. So we would still advocate, again, pushing a society to engage in behavior.
Okay, let me ask you, Evan and Adam, and maybe Easy, you can jump in on this. Sorry to hog it, but let's say there was a phenomenon where people started using their genitals on objects like trees and things like that. Now, if that emerged, Adam, because what's emergent is virtuous. If that emerged as a phenomenon, would you then?
I didn't say what's emergent is inherently virtuous. It points us in a direction. You have to see what direction we're moving in on average. But continue your question.
Okay, so the question is, if people started using their sexual organs on objects and trees and things like this, would you then demand to add that to sexual education? How to safely?
Are you asking if like 50% of society just randomly one day is like, we're going to start fucking trees, or
just even 6% of the school?
If it's like statistically significant, you'd probably want to address it in some way. And first of all, tell people this is probably extremely dangerous and not safe. It's if other people are seeing it, it's probably very weird to them and psychologically scarring. And there's
but
probably
what if it made them happy? What if it made them happy? Wouldn't it be virtuous to
if someone like in the privacy of their own home has like a little tree or a plant or something? I would say that's amoral. Like I personally would find it weird on like an emotional level, obviously. But
so
what
you find
one quick thing, I don't want to cut you off. Just really quick, want to interject this. I understand that we have a 2.5 hours, 3 hours here, and these are interesting conversations, and I'm happy to engage in them. But I want to make sure we're not spending the next 2 hours like, what about this weird sexual scenario? What would happen here? Like,
well, there's a lot of sexual scenarios going on, dude. There's a lot of
there's also other facets of society.
I understand, but I'm talking about decency, and I want to know how the progressive model will manage.
What do you define
decency?
I'm curious as what you define as decency and how that's explicitly entailed from the Christian worldview and how it's defined.
Indecency or decency?
Decency.
Either.
Why is decency entailed from Christianity, and how is it defined by Christianity?
Well, decency would probably be an entailment of modesty and humility. So, for instance, if you looked at someone and they had their ass out in public, like, super thong, jiggling around in a public scenario, under your view, they're not doing anything. They're just living their life. They're dancing. Look away would be the libertarian and the progressive remedy to that. There would be no problem with it ultimately. So from our view, we would say that's indecent because it's not humble. You're not, especially a woman, you're not covered up. You're like, there's a threshold at which you're going to be using your buttocks for a very specific reason, which is sexual, right? And so if you agree that going outside in public and shaking your ass around like you're on all fours and stuff, that's not public masturbation according to you, right? So you wouldn't really police that in a progressive society, right? Under a Christian view, that kind of indecency, right, would be examined, and we go, under our view, we would actually justify the use of force to remove indecency. But you guys
so are you
don't
talking
really have
about someone wearing a thong and walking into an elementary school, or like someone at the beach wearing a bikini? Like, I feel like the devil is really in the details here, and there are going to be like certain gray areas you have to iron out through some kind of consensus building and some kind of like, what exactly is the threshold of what is appropriate clothing and what isn't? I don't think these are very strictly, cleanly defined concepts.
Okay, but let's say the threshold isn't as exhaustive. as you like, right? Let's just say but the intent was to find the threshold, even if it wasn't the highest resolution threshold, right? Because even under your view, there would be those thresholds, right? It would be like, we're almost there. What I'm saying is that there would actually be an intended pursuit of that threshold. I'm saying under your view, there's no reason to pursue policing and decency at all, as long as what is it, Evan and Adam? As long as it's not harming someone, right?
As long as it's not harming the broader social project, social cohesion. Yeah, sure. So like that's why I would say if someone's wearing that in a school, then I have a lot more questions than if someone's wearing a bikini on Miami Beach.
Right. So now you've declared that there are certain places where certain things are decent and certain places they're
situational,
indecent, right? Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Under a progressive view, I'm not sure. It seems a bit more clear for a Christian paradigm to be able to kind of traverse those things. And I'm not sure it's clear at all from your paradigm how you're going to navigate what's indecent and when.
Yeah.
Being that your ultimate priority under your paradigm for both of you is let people do what they want, right? Let them pursue their own happiness, essentially.
I wouldn't say that that's the ultimate. I would say that that's one a feature of it, but I would say that the ultimate, I guess, core value of the paradigm would be to rectify injustices. So I'd say progressivism broadly doesn't seek necessarily to advocate new ways in which humanity explore, I guess, random sexual virtues, but rather evaluating ways in which society is already feeling real ramifications from real social phenomenons, from real problems that actually exist, and attempting with both reason and empiricism, how do we actually rectify those?
I also have a real quick question for you, JimBob, just to interject real quick. So like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like one thing that you're pointing out is that with Christianity, a lot of these thresholds are maybe more clearly defined and more clearly designated than in a progressive society. And I would ask you if there was some other religion that had more clearly defined, more strict requirements or definitions of what counts as decency, would that make it on those grounds better than Christianity? I'm genuinely curious.
No, I wouldn't say because of the
specificity of the threshold.
Yeah. Like that could be done under like Islam, right? We would say, they're pretty clear on the things. Then it would probably expand, from my view, it would expand to, we would get into epistemology and metaethics and deeper things that wouldn't be in this debate. But yeah, Adam, if that came up, if you guys were Muslims right now, we would debate something much larger than merely, is there any normative authority? That's kind of what I'm pointing to in general, is that I actually agree, Adam, more so with your account of what progressivism is, that it's what's progress, what's justice. You're saying, in your experience, Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's still kind of ambiguous and it's hard to pin down. And I'm saying, well, from a Christian view, even if you disagreed with a Christian paradigm and you believed all of the sort of bumper stickers about it, right? You would have to agree that it's at least has cohesion. I'm not saying it's better because it has. I might actually be saying it's if it can be applied, is it better under your view, Adam? Because I'm arguing under your view. Me and Easy are granting the secular view here, or if you let me use that term, progressive view, we're granting that, and we're saying, okay, well, isn't it true under your view that Christianity is still more cohesive, that it's clearer in its normative position and how to
So I would say cohesion is necessary, but not sufficient, because you can have cohesion, but also exclusion, I think, is going to be a much bigger issue with Christianity that does not necessarily exist to the same extent with progressivism. I would admit fully, I think if we're having a good faith discussion, that yes, when it comes to progressivism, there is probably more ambiguity and more of like learning as you go. But I think that is a sign of humility and honesty with how these things work. And I think, like, sure, it's true that with a preordained system of values and ethics with Christianity that are very hyper specifically defined, or Islam or anything else, you might have more concrete parameters to judge it based on. But I think the concreteness is not sufficient to say this is a better system than something that's maybe a little more ambiguous and you have to figure it out over time.
But what you would at least say, sorry, one more question, Easy, sorry. Would you at least concede that cohesion would actually be a necessary precondition if it were to be better?
Sure.
Okay. So you would say, at least give us a point that we're ahead of you on the preconditions for what might be
Sure.
better.
And Evan said earlier, Christianity and progressivism are not mutually exclusive. I'm sure there's many aspects of Western understandings of morality and society that are probably somewhat influenced by the Christian tradition. And I don't have an issue with that. The issue I have with a Christian society, as I think you're defining it, is that it is by definition going to exclude certain types of people, and I think lead to certain negative externalities that could be remedied with, yes, a more ambiguous, more iterative system, which I think is progressivism.
Easy, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to ask, I guess, to make it a little bit more simple too. And I do want to clarify so we can actually start progressing more too. But when you guys say better, like progressivism is better than Christianity, is it better in terms of like a cultural sense? Like if today society comes to an agreement that we have a specific set of cohesion that we're going to strive for, and we have specific goals, this could also change 100 years from now. Is that kind of the position you guys are taking to understand?
I think that the changes are happening in a certain direction. So like there's going to be evolution and things that change over time, but I don't think that's an arbitrary change. I think it's like, if you want to get into like maybe evolutionary biology, that there is probably some direction this is moving towards. I think things like religion and all these different things we used to regulate how people ought to behave, how they ought to perceive the world, are probably going to be guided by some set of like natural selection or some kind of, like, as I was saying, an iterative process. So I'm not saying there's going to be things that we're not going to miss. There's probably going to be a lot of problems that the system itself allows you, though, to iron out those problems, identify them, and change them because of its adaptability. Whereas I think in Christianity, there isn't that self-correcting mechanism that would allow you to overcome those kinds of hurdles, and you're kind of like set in stone.
So, but what is progressivism itself? What is it going to lead to? Because I know you guys said that freedom is going to derive from society or whatever virtues we come up with. But what exactly are we going towards? Like if we say, okay, we're going to implement progressive values and we're all going to live according to this, what exactly is it going to lead to? What's the end result?
Trying to eliminate as many social, cultural, economic, and political obstacles as possible that would preclude someone from being able to freely decide to live a virtuous life such that they are contributing to the harmoniousness of society.
Right. I think the goal is fundamentally going to be creating a society that enables people to pursue both the more rudimentary, universal like goods in society, such as like the material, and then their deeper, more psychological purposes like creativity and connecting with others. And that's going to be, obviously that's going to be there's going to be variety across individuals and communities, but we do have, for example, outcomes to look at with specific things that we would mark as being progressive. So, for example, having a strong welfare system, we do have nations to look at that when those sorts of policies are implemented, we can actually take a look at what exactly those outcomes are relative to, for example, Christian societies, which doesn't actually have any clear outlined economic policy.
Well, but even in that specific example, like the welfare system, what outcome are you looking for? Is it family? Is it income? Is it
reduction in poverty? And yeah, I would say that would be the number one thing with welfare, and then also economic mobility.
What if people were
because economic mobility and poverty are obstacles to pursuing those virtues?
What if you found that a lot of people who are in poverty are happy? Would you infringe on them and give them money, or
I'm not forced to accept anything? I mean,
well then, you'd have to say, okay, but if it's the case that in many countries the poorest people actually through their adoption, I should say, of religion, even if it wasn't Christianity, if they're happy, right, with that, even though they're poor, what would your prescription for that be?
Are they happy as a function of their poverty, or are they happy in despite of their poverty? Because I think that's the deeper question. And if you're saying they're happy as a function of their poverty, theoretically, yes, if people are happy because they're poor, then I guess it would make sense.
Well, you're saying
that's not obviously the case.
Yeah, but then why solve poverty then, from your view, then, if it's not to increase happiness? What is it to do?
I think when you remove those kinds of obstacles, it opens up like the aperture of what people can pursue and how they choose to live life. And the more, like I was saying, political, social, cultural obstacles are there, the more that aperture is narrowed in terms of what path they can go down. So I would just argue that in the absence of poverty, people probably have the ability and the freedom to make better decisions. And sure, you can argue when you widen that aperture, you also increase like the badness or like the wrongness of decisions they can make as well, which is why I would say it's not just that freedom and opening up the aperture in and of itself is good, but you want to give people as much freedom as possible within certain bounds, and then have incentive structures in place such that they are able to pursue what we would call good ends or virtuous ends.
And we don't have to speak in theoretics. We know empirically that at the very least, there's a certain threshold of income and economic stability that people need, or at the very least, their satisfaction with life grows to up until that point.
So does progressivism incentivize family and procreation?
If that enables people to live a more fulfilling life, then sure.
Okay.
It sounds like a lot of your guys is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like the ultimate goal is just giving people more options. So it's not necessarily like value family, value a specific structure of the economy. It's more or less just giving people the option to decide what they want to do.
And then ideally structuring things in such a way that they would make what I would think there is probably a correct option to pick, or a set of correct options they can pick. So like that's why I was saying earlier, I don't want to conflate progressivism with like hedonism or consumerism. I think there's a lot of negative things that we probably all four of us can agree on. And I would not say that like just because someone freely decides to do something that it makes it inherently virtuous or good. Maybe it can be amoral and not really have moral value either which way. But I would say that like when we talk about limiting poverty, people, when they don't have that kind of anxiety weighing them down and narrowing the way they view the world, they can probably engage in like a lot more virtuous behavior when they're free to do that.
Adam, what in addition to just pure consumerism and materialism does progressive have offer that Christianity doesn't? Because Christian view, we accept that there are circumstances of the world and scarcity, and it's not like we take a position against, let's say, making money or using your talents and skills. It's just that Christianity offers human beings a distinction between the material world and the spiritual practice. And ultimately, I really don't see from a progressive view what else you guys are offering other than pure consumerism, materialism, and
our view doesn't preclude or neglect what you're laying out. You can totally live under that framework within a progressive society. We're just saying that when you have the adaptability of a progressive society, there are built-in self-corrective mechanisms that allow you to maybe still have that kind of like driving force of people moving towards, like, I want people to have families and reproduce and all this stuff. That's all great. But like, I want people to choose to do that. And if someone is, for example, gay, I don't think it's wrong for them to not have children. I think it'd be great if they got married and had a family as a gay couple. That'd be awesome. But like, I just don't think that these parameters can be as strictly and sort of like harshly defined as I think Christianity would do.
And I don't think it's fair to associate economic stability with consumerism or hedonism in economic sense. I think that part of what economic stability offers is time of leisure, and that includes time for expressing creativity, working on something that isn't necessarily economically productive, or time spending time with loved ones, which both we know again from empiricism increase satisfaction.
Okay, but what is a, let's say, you mentioned homosexuality and two dudes renting the womb of a woman to have a kid. How would that, what does that offer your utility based society?
I mean, I'd want them to be good parents, obviously. I mean, it depends. Again, devil's in the details, a lot of these things. As long as they're being good parents that are instilling their children with the same values we've been talking about this whole time, I think that'd be a good thing. I don't think that inherently a couple being heterosexual is the defining factor that makes it good or bad.
I'm just wondering what it offers.
It offers the fulfillment of being a parent, if that's something that somebody wants to have, despite being, homosexual in their sexuality. It offers them that fulfillment.
So fulfillment. So, I mean, if it offered them fulfillment for 5 men to be in a house and they call themselves whatever you would call it, what is that, a quintuple? And they bought some kids, you'd be totally fine with 5 gay dudes in a house, I think, raising one kid, right? What's that? Say it again, Adam.
I think pentuple.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. But would you guys advocate for that if they said, "Listen, progressive Evan and Adam, I'm so glad you guys are our representatives. Can you make it so 5 dudes can marry each other and raise one kid?" If they thought that was going to give them happiness, you'd advocate for it, right?
Well, the outcomes also depend on the actual child's like whether or not the actual child is going to be, living a fulfilled life. But I don't have any sort of empiricism to prove that one way or the other, and neither do you. So I don't necessarily see that, and I don't actually see how that's necessarily entailed as being wrong from the Christian worldview either.
And if we find out at some
fellas,
point that
we're
like
going
too
to
many
Or
parents
the
quickly,
why
is bad,
how it is. Yeah.
quickly, guys, we're going to do this for a few more minutes, and then Evan and Adam, you guys are going to be able to cross-examine for half an hour. We'll get 3 more minutes of this.
cool.
Easy. Anything left there?
Sorry, my stream for some reason cut off. It cut off like twice already. But I was gonna ask, well, like even there's no empiricism you said for the homosexuality example. What kind of threshold are we going to be looking for as far as when we implement some sort of duties or say this is wrong and this is right? Is it just outcome based? Because even that, letting them act on that thing is going to be a precondition to the outcome.
There are probably certain tendencies that if you behave in a certain way, then it typically is going to entail certain types of outcomes. You might be able to find specific instances where that isn't necessarily borne out. So like, for example, if we discover through some kind of psychological, increasing of our knowledge that like having too many parental figures in a family is objectively detrimental to the progression or development of a child, then I might be taking like a different response to what you're saying. But as of now, it just seems like it's sort of like an arbitrary like factor that I'm not sure would necessarily entail some kind of negative outcome.
Even when you measure the outcome of the child's progress or trajectory in life, you said it's an objective metric. By whose metric? Like whose objective metric? What exactly are we going to be looking for in terms of this is a good way that the kid is being raised, or this is not a good way that the kid is developing?
They're behaving in a way that perpetuates the type of harmonious system we would want to keep upheld. So like I said, I do believe there are certain things that are virtue, certain things that people, certain ways people ought to view the world and ought to conduct themselves. I don't think everything is just, like Evan said, we're not libertarians.
And I think in the cases where, and this is important just as a clarification, in the cases in which there are going to be nuances to what exactly the pros and cons are of specific outcomes. So like this happens in policy all the time. We know that some economic policies may have externalities, but it's a matter of weighing out the pros and the cons. The method through which and determining what exactly the decisions are going to be made is going to be through that process of rigorous debate and reason and empiricism, which is why progressivism encourages pluralism.
Okay, but you guys, just to make sure I understand though, you guys said that there's got to be some sort of cohesion and a social norm that we are to uphold. Is that correct?
Sure.
Okay, and then if there's like a specific, like a small percentage of individuals that want to come in and disrupt the entire flow of how society ought to behave because there's cohesion in it, we probably shouldn't allow that, correct?
Depends on how you mean exactly, like what specifically you mean by that. But like I said, we want to push people to choose to not behave in that way as best as we can. If people, despite all of those incentives, are still deciding to act in that way.
No, he's asking a more direct question. Obviously, this will be the last one, but I'll rephrase it for you. Let's say from whatever metric you have, which I still don't know what it is, how you know you've obtained harmony, right? Let's say you've reached peak harmony. Easy saying, let's say a cluster of people come in, they're in the society and they start disrupting what you, by your metrics, say is harmony. We're asking, how could you argue from your own position to exclude them? Because now they're pursuing your paradigm inside your paradigm. They're just doing what you're saying. They're creating harmony for themselves, and it requires.
Exclusive.
I actually think that in a way it may be that. So I guess it really depends on the specific example and what you mean by disruption. But I would use something, for example, like the existence of trans people as an example of this, where disruption can actually encourage, for example, I guess, progressive, rigorous debate, because there is a small group of people that are disrupting something that normally we understood as being these rigid, strict gender norms, and the society around them, through their disruption, has adapted to incorporate them and also change its own.
You mean force us to lie? You mean force us to lie by disruption?
No, it's not a lie, and unless you actually have a substantive unless you actually believe that like trans people are substantively lying about their identity rather than just your semantic misunderstanding.
No, I'm saying you can't offer a referent for what a trans person is. Therefore, forcing other people to refer to something there's no referent for is forcing them to lie.
Can you clarify?
When you say forcing, do you mean like by the government, or that there's like some kind of cultural or social pressure?
like, yeah, social pressure. For instance, the government is included. By the way, there are schools in the state that I'm in that compels the teacher to affirm a position that a child takes about their own identity, and they're forced to affirm it. Otherwise, they could be sued or fired. That's coercive, forcing the person whose identity, let's say Christian, forcing them to lie. Is that disharmony or harmony?
So I can't speak to the specific example you just gave, so I don't want to delve into that too much. But I would say like anything that is against the general principles of the First Amendment, I would not be in favor of that, because I think that there are, like Evan was saying, like there's costs and benefits to all this stuff, and you're going to have to absorb some kind of cost to move in a direction that we think is socially harmonious. And I want to add one more thing you said earlier, like you don't know what exactly we mean when we talk about like progress and movement. And this might be sort of like a abstract way to illustrate this, but I think it's helpful if anyone here knows like mathematics. You guys know what an asymptote is? An asymptote is like it's like a function that's like always approaching a certain number, but it never fully gets there. Like as you zoom in more and more, there's always going to be like some gap.
One, it's always 99. Like
there's like a tendency towards a certain discrete value, but it's never going to actually be reached. You just decrease like the level of the delta, I guess, between where you are and where you want to be.
Yeah, but that's disanalogous, Adam, because even in that example, the target of what you're reaching. We're saying you don't even have the target.
But we know that there is a target, I guess, is what I'm saying. We know there's a target.
Move this on.
We know
Never
what a target.
Okay. Never
there is a target.
And it becomes more apparent what that is as we decrease that delta. We can narrow the aperture of what we're considering as the target.
Yeah, I get.
Never a good time to do this, guys, but you fellas are going to need your half an hour as well. So I'm just going to read out some super chats. Guys, if you want to go to the toilet or do anything right now, then do that, because I'm going to do this for a minute or so. Just turn your cameras off and go to the toilet if you need to. I see Easy's already emptied the bladder, which is good. So first of all, we have got Rabid Player says harmony can carry a subjective definition. This is why a book like the Bible exists, to clarify the gray areas that present themselves in topics like this. Justin Henley for $10 says your side appeals to change, which means it cannot be objective. Objective truth of morality would be unchanging. Example: what is the objective moral age of consent and or voting or alcohol? Do you guys have an answer for that? What the objective age of consent for voting or alcohol is?
No, I don't think that there's an objective moral age of consent. I think that we've generally understood, though, that around the age of 18 is when you have enough cognitive function to consent to things that, I guess, impact you on a more substantive basis. But by the way, that doesn't necessarily mean that consenting to something alone makes it morally virtuous or even non-exploitative. I think that consent can still happen. That's why, for example, like groomers exist. And I push back on, like, for example, red pillars who believe that like older men should date like 19-year-old women and, oh, it's of age. This is more of just like a legal question. And I think that the age of consent, again, is going to be centered around when do we want to make it at the very least legally? That way the state doesn't have an interest in getting involved.
Okay. Justin Henley again for $10 says follow up: if you named any specific ages or biological statuses, then that is fixed. There's no progress needed. It's done. And the Barron experience for $10 says liberalism / progressive ideology is just poison to any society. So we have got half an hour on the clock. Evan, Adam, whatever you guys want to go into whatsoever, politics, culture, whatever that may be, you guys can go for it.
Okay, so Evan, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'm curious as to I think that one of the issues I have with the framing around Christianity is there's this indignation that it's more objective, and maybe it may be more concise than progressivism, but I think that the objectivity is dubious, as it's fundamentally going to be based on interpretation. And one of the questions that you relate to us is who exactly is making the determination on what is considered progress, etc. But I can ask the exact same question: who is exactly responsible for interpreting the text, whether it be in the Bible or any of the various other books within Protestant Christianity?
Well, this is how does
that process work?
Got you. This is an epistemic question, but the debate isn't about how do you know something's objective or true. The question is, if we all prefer whatever, pick any denomination of Christianity. If we preferred to gather around that denomination, use force to dominate the government and inform policy based on whatever that arbitrary choice was. I'm from this debate, the question isn't how do we know Christianity is true or which is the true church, because it's irrelevant, because the only argument at hand here is our preferences versus your preferences, and whether or not our preferences, even if they were totally arbitrary, even if we granted you that it's totally arbitrary, there's no normative authority for anything, even if that was the case, whatever the consensus was by preference, which is why I included in my opener, if one of you guys, I know someone who doesn't consider themselves a progressive, but they're certainly atheist, they actually prefer the Christian ethical system for policy, but they don't believe any of the Christianity. So it's like your hypothetical is an epistemic question about the consistency of Christianity, but the consistency of Christianity epistemically is irrelevant to the dominant, whatever the dominant view was. If it came into power, you guys couldn't really argue against it from a progressive view. Why? Because it's preference leading. It's just whoever wins.
I don't think I actually know that I'm not asking an epistemic question. I'm not asking how do you have a knowledge on whether or not, for example, the text in the Christianity is true, and determining which of those texts is the right interpretation. I'm asking, as a matter of practice, how does that play out? Because I would posit that it is actually through the age of the Enlightenment and values that I would distill as being progressive are actually what has evolved Christianity's own interpretations of their own text, slavery being a key example.
Okay, so you're asking if it was implemented, you're saying how does it look if Christianity is implemented, right, into society? Well, you've answered your own question. If you agree that human rights are a thing, which your own view can't justify, if you agree that human rights exist and you just admitted that they're remnant of, let's say, a Protestant view, maybe we would say, maybe deist, someone would argue even. If that was the case, even that iteration of Christianity, you're actually appealing to, if you're appealing to rights by your own admission, right?
I don't know if I understand your question.
Did a Christian worldview, generally speaking, give you this concept of Enlightenment principles like human rights, human dignity, created? These things are self-evident. We're created and endowed with things, right? This is not a naturalist point of view, correct?
Yeah, it's not a naturalist point of
So
view.
what?
I don't.
So is it religious? Is it a religious view then?
No, I think it's fundamentally going to be based on human empathy.
Okay, no, but empathy. Okay, that's interesting.
And in accordance with reason.
Did you know? You said you're an empiricist. You're into empiricism. Did you know that empathy itself is determined to be an involuntary response that's often a projection of your own back knowledge of your own experience, and often wrong? By the way, empathy itself being involuntary, if that was the arbiter for what is good, if as long as I feel something when someone's being attacked, I'm not obligated to do anything but make sure I feel what they might be feeling, correct?
Yeah, you're not.
I don't need to do it. I don't need to help them.
You're
right?
not obligated objectively. No.
Yeah, so someone's getting raped in an alley. As long as I feel empathy for the woman in the alley, according to your paradigm, I could just keep walking, right?
Well, that's why we do encourage, or we have a system of like a state and laws and the provision of force to prevent stuff like that from happening, because we understand that individuals have an interest in preserving their own interests. And
force, you mean men, right?
That is, well, sure.
So you're
honestly, I don't.
So you're sexist, right?
I don't care to get in the whole gender thing, but
well, I mean, it's important because
but that's a side tangent.
But it is important because if you agree that even a version of Christianity that sort of adopts this Enlightenment approach to rights, and you also admit from an empirical position rights are illusory, there's not an actual thing empirically called a right, would you constitute that as a false belief worth believing, worth adhering to, even though it's false?
No, it's not. It's not false if it's an acknowledgement that it's a societal construct.
Okay, so Christianity,
because we're not making the claim that the rights that we create as a matter of law are objective or natural.
Well, I'm saying,
but by the way, that's also something that like some, for example, secularists do believe. And as long as there's a mutual agreement between those things, and that's what I think I was hinting at earlier, of universal understanding and universal interests, is it doesn't really matter how we come to these approaches. There are certain things that society tends towards.
Yeah.
And I would describe that as being motivated by human empathy and reason.
Okay.
And then,
Okay,
that's extended to empiricism.
Okay,
but,
fair enough.
But like, for example, Adam may have a different normative framework than I. But because we agree on these like broad and practical implementations, that's fundamentally
empathy. So Evan, empathy and rights. What I'm gathering is, do you just correct me if I'm wrong? Do you think following your empathy and abiding by something called rights, even though you agree it's a construct, you're saying let's start with that? That's a good starting framework.
I think
that we agree on that.
If by starting, I mean that I think that that's how people come to their understanding in recognizing the interests of others. Because I think the ethics are fundamentally going to be looking after the interests of others without diminishing the interests of others.
The reason I asked that is because if you think society is better with rights, if a right is an entitlement, but you don't have a duty. For instance, whether you guys believe in gun ownership or not, or whatever, let's just say you have the right to own a gun, but you don't have an obligation to own a gun, right? So that's what I'm pointing that out.
The right to own a gun is just the absence of the infringement of the state.
So you don't, but it doesn't mean you have to own a gun. You're not obligated. So the problem with the rights-based position is that you're adhering to empathy and rights. Rights gives you an entitlement, but it doesn't give you a deontology of why we ought to acknowledge the entitlement at all. You're just saying we should because it feels right.
Well, we should because that's what we've agreed on, and we don't have an issue with people not agreeing to it out of some sort of
but we could
moral,
but we could.
We don't. And I think
that's what I'm saying. But we could, and it wouldn't be inconsistent with your view because we agreed upon it, right? Whatever we agree upon collectively is a go for you guys, right?
No, not necessarily. If it's not to the detriment, if it's not to the detriment, or if it's to the detriment of others. If by you mean everybody, and by everybody you literally mean everybody, then sure. If it advances human flourishment, and that's why we were mentioning earlier that it's not necessarily incompatible with Christianity. Theoretically, theoretically, you could have a Christian progressive society. And that's what I was hinting at earlier, in that you're in the ways in which Christians in practice have interpreted their own text and advanced their own ideology has actually been through the Enlightenment values that progressivism is centered around.
Say that again? Sorry, that last part.
The way that Christians in practice, whether or not they are obtaining this through some sort of epistemological truth or not, the way in practice that Christians evolve their own interpretations of their own texts that are also written by man, the way that happens is through the processes that we've delineated from the Enlightenment, which is exactly what progressivism is centered around.
Well, I would argue against that, Evan. I would actually argue.
I'm just saying you rely on these human developmental emotions and reasons.
Okay.
Christian societies do that.
I got you. I understand what you're saying, and I would agree with you, but you're actually talking about progressive Christianity, like heterodox, basically. So I would grant you your description is accurate, but you're giving yourself a lot of liberty by saying anyone who claims to be Christian and abides by a classical liberal approach or an Enlightenment approach is Christian, and they've evolved it, right? I would reject that. I would say, no, that's actually a mistake. This is why, Evan, I just want to give you a distinction from a Christian paradigm. Do you think there's a difference between rights and duties?
I think that, well, yeah, I would say that there's I interpret rights as being strictly societal.
So if Christians, if suddenly tomorrow you push the button and there were no rights at all, would Christians still have duties?
According to their worldview, or like or like objectively speaking?
Their worldview. If you took away rights as a concept, would they still have duties? Like, for instance, if you removed all rights, all the Bill of Rights was gone tomorrow. Ben Shapiro's pissing his pants, right? He's pissing his little diapers. Okay. By the way, I despise that guy. So let's say that happens, right? And all of the constitutionalist right-wing people are just losing their shit. I'm saying Christians, the ones who are practicing, they would still practice their duties. For instance, they would still have the duty to procreate, to be the mini priest of their house, to participate in sacraments, to pray. These things don't go away from a Christian view, even if you remove the Enlightenment. I'll just grant you that the Enlightenment has had an effect on what we would now call progressive Christianity. But Evan and Adam, I would just as well swap you guys for a proponent of those that Christian view as well for the next debate. So it's not really saying much, but I kind of get where you're trying to go with it, is that you're trying to say that, well, look what the Enlightenment has done for Christianity. See how they adapted? And I would say, I just wouldn't grant that was I think that was a mistake, honestly. It led to feminism. It led to feminism.
Sure, but you would grant some things that were adapted from the Enlightenment, like the abolition of slavery, and the Christians who justified their abolitionist ideology,
sure,
based on principles.
Yes,
I'm just saying you wouldn't make a broad sweeping brush. Sure,
Evan,
obviously, yeah.
Okay, can you come to the correct conclusion from the wrong reasoning ultimately?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so I would just put that in that category. I would be like, yeah, they abolishing slavery, right? Elevating other human beings to the status of image bearers of God, right? Equal from that view under God. Sure, but the problem is there's a lot more entailed in the Enlightenment that caused a disaster for modern, what I would call modern Christianity. One, and most importantly, that you guys would advocate for, I think it's a complete disaster regardless of the worldview. Feminism is the worst thing for society that we've seen in the last 100 years. The worst thing.
So why?
But that's progressive, right? That's progressive.
Why is it that Christians? It took the Enlightenment to come around on things like abolishing slavery, and they weren't able to decipher that from their own texts. If Christianity in and of itself, in its practice, is more beneficial for society, why did it take these things like human rights, which was deciphered out of the Enlightenment, to actually teach Christians, or rather help them reinterpret their own text?
Doesn't that question presuppose that it wouldn't have happened without that? I would have to grant you your presupposition.
Sure. Okay, sure. Well, let me just ask, why didn't it happen through their own interpretation then?
I think perhaps modernity. I think that maybe historically, when these philosophers started crafting these ideas for the Enlightenment, that whole project was pointing toward individualism specifically. The problem I have with it isn't obviously the abolition of slavery, but could you see that it went completely in the other direction toward pure individualism? And if that's the case, it's possible. Like, for instance, let's take Martin Luther King Jr. as a perfect example. There's this lawful segregation, right? And everyone's going, what the hell's going on? But if you study it, even under such law, the Black communities were in churches. They were learning to read. They were catching up very quickly. They had their own businesses. They had a lot of their own transportation. They basically had their own culture. And could you see that fixing one thing that you find unjust can actually cause a rubber band effect into the complete other polar opposite, which is,
I have a practical question in that vein, sort of like addressing what you're talking about. I'm going to presume that both you guys are against slavery, like broadly speaking, I'm guessing.
Well, okay. Unless you consider, unless you can make a meaningful distinction between
chattel slavery, to be specific.
Prison and slavery. Can you?
Sure. I'm talking specifically about like chattel slavery as it existed in the U.S. I'm guessing you guys are both against that. And at the time, there were abolitionists who used Christianity as their justification. And there was also pro-slavery people who might have used Christianity as their justification. And this is genuinely a question for clarity's sake. If you guys were to go back in time and have some kind of political voice, some kind of ability to advocate, what kinds of arguments would you make to advocate against slavery, if not the types of arguments that me and Evan would make? And how would you convince those other Christians who would use the exact same religion as a justification for slavery itself?
I'd use the metaphysical distinction of made in God's image. And
And
that
what if
that
they
and
just
if
say
they
like no, like they're not the
then I
same,
would
they don't
ask
look like us?
then I would ask them, what is their normative authority for interpretation? And if theirs doesn't match a 2,000-year-old normative authority, apostolic succession, they're ultimately admitting that they're just imagining this stuff up in their head and just crafting. By the way, Adam and Evan, I argue against these types of Christians all the time.
Sure, and I'm not trying to say that you don't, but
No,
what I'm
I'm
trying
just
to
saying, like, it's
sure.
not like it's kind of a moot point, because if ultimately Christianity has to go back in time and adhere to something normative,
Yeah,
Easy and I would both agree that cohesion and the continuation of the Christian tradition in practice would be the only way you could actually keep it intact over time, which is why
sure.
Easy pushed back on your pluralism. You thought self-correcting is good. From Easy and I, our position is that we actually do have a self-correcting system, because it's maintained over time, that veers actually less than your paradigm. Christianity, even if you say, bro, 50,000 denominations, right? People say that slogan, right? Even that is from your view, it's like self-correction would be arbitrary anyway. There's actually no reference point for what's correct and what's not. At least Christianity, even if I granted all the splintering that happened in modernity and all the heresies and all of these new propped up churches, I would argue that it still has a past to refer to that's normative.
Sure. I
Even
guess
if
what
you
I'm trying to
disagree
get at
with
is,
it.
in practical terms, how do you resolve disputes between people that are using this exact same justification to make their point? And kind of turning back what you asked me in the
Debate.
beginning, like if you have a 50-50 split, I guess what is the rubric or the metric that's used to resolve the debate in practical terms?
Well, I would debate, but I would also have no problem using force. That's why I think both of our paradigms, Evan, Adam, and JB and Easy, that ultimately force doctrine is the ultimate arbiter, correct?
So are you guys Christian nationalists, just to clarify?
Can you define what that means?
Having a system of government, maybe particularly in the US, where there are laws in place and statutes in place that are meant to broadly enforce Christian values and adherence to the Christian religion and putting it above other religions?
Is that basically what Evan described as the remnant of the Enlightenment movement?
I mean, like codified into law.
Yeah, we already have that, by the way.
I mean, in very explicit terms, that gives
You mean
like
yeah.
Christianity is officially recognized by name as being the religion of the country, and that the laws are very directly referential towards Christian scripture and use that as a justification.
No, I would. If you're arguing that the church is identical to the state, now you didn't say that, but I just want to make sure. Yeah. Are you asking, is Christian nationalism the way you define it? The church and the state are the same entity? Or
what I'm asking is the state using its monopoly of force to, I guess, make Christianity as prevalent as possible within the society that it governs.
So, for example, would you punish homosexuality, not just ban or outlaw gay marriages, but actually punish homosexual sexual acts?
I would start with shame. I would start with public shame, and I would start by removing that kind of behavior from the public sphere.
Why wouldn't you use force? Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't
that
you
is
use
force?
Force
that is force. Removing.
Why wouldn't you use the force of the state?
Why wouldn't I, or would I?
Yeah, why wouldn't you?
I just said I would. I would say indecency. Perfect example, like gay pride parades. Wait.
So to clarify, you would punish gay people through the state for exhibiting homosexual acts. Like if the state had evidence and knowledge that, for example, just two men had sex, you would punish them.
I'm not sure I would skip to that. I feel like that's a further down the road.
I would say, Evan.
Why? Why wouldn't you skip to that?
Why? Because the reason is, first, I would look at society that's public first. I would look at the public square first. I would look at the private last, right? I find it more effective, by the way, Evan, is once you influence public decency and customs from your worldview, in this case Christian, and that becomes the norm, you don't need all of the threat of force right away, because the people who want to do that stuff basically navigate away from that society. So first and foremost, Evan and Adam, I think it's more effective, just so you know, it's more effective. We've seen this through the Karunka thing, is that social shame actually is very effective in getting people in line with certain behaviors. Would you agree?
Yeah, broadly speaking, I think that's true.
So I would go for that first.
If you had achieved the degree of social shame that's, I guess, maximized, would you then use a threat of the state? Like, let's say, for example, you've actually reduced homosexual behavior, but there's people who are still engaging it. Would you use, like, for example, the states to, let's say, imprison homosexuals?
Or even investigate if there's suspicion that two people might be gay, like two dudes living together in an apartment. Would you want to surveil them?
No, I would move to another phase, which is make living in that society, which would be already predominantly Christian, almost nearly impossible to continue.
So is there eventually a phase in which the state does have moral authority to punish gay people and throw homosexuals in prisons?
At some point?
Yeah.
I'm not actually sure. No, I'm not sure that would be required under my view.
What is your hesitation in making as like definitive of a statement on that as you would in terms of social pressure? Like, let's say we've achieved all the social pressure you want, perfect conditions in a public setting, but people still engage in gay sex in like a private setting. How would you want the state to engage?
I'm also curious why you wouldn't use the state. Do you think that the state's invasion of their private life is inherently wrong? Because it seems clear to me that if it's in accordance with your Christian values or the values of Christianity, it wouldn't inherently be wrong unless you believe in something like individual rights and the interests and the protections against the state. But if that's not the case, then I don't know what you're appealing to.
Well, the thing is, I would be more likely to have a system that basically offered healing for them first and foremost.
Sure.
Punishment.
But the question is fundamentally.
Punishment. Hold on.
Fundamentally,
you're asking about punishment.
If all other avenues have been exhausted, do you see it as morally wrong for the state to, let's say, throw homosexuals in prison or punish homosexuals by law?
Just if they found out that they were living somewhere and doing these things?
Yeah.
Right. And all other avenues have been exhausted.
That you couldn't stop them? No, I would excommunicate them. I wouldn't even need to throw them in jail. Under my paradigm, I would just
excommunicate mean?
I would just
like a country.
Well, you don't need to jail them to get them out of your town, do you?
Sure, but why I'm asking you, what does that mean practically? Like kick them out of the country?
Deportation, revocation of citizenship.
Yeah. Well, what are you talking about at a federal level or at a town level? I mean, what are we talking about?
Either way, but through the use of the state. So this could be state.
Let's say state or local because they tend to do criminal stuff.
No, I wouldn't put a strict threshold on the use of force. Now, the case by case, it would have to be examined. And I just want to let you know that the distinction between the church and the state would maintain that they would work together. And so something like that could actually be, I'm not sure. I don't know what it would look like that all avenues are you tried everything else, because from my view, the work of Christianity changes people. So
if all avenues haven't been exhausted, but let's say like the country to the north of us, they're also a Christian nation and they decide to do that, and they exhausted maybe a fair amount of avenues, would you see it as as something wrong for them to do that?
Or even undesirable or not optimal? Would
you see it as wrong for
I don't think it'd be optimal. I would take Adam's approach. I would try to find.
But you don't find it morally wrong for the states to imprison homosexuals for engaging in gay behavior. You don't find that morally wrong or ethically wrong?
No, not necessarily. No.
And to be clear, like this is not a gotcha question. I think what we're trying to get at.
Wait, hold on. Under a progressive view, do you?
Yes.
Do we what?
Why is it wrong if it's just a preference, though?
Well,
how are your preferences wrong?
It's wrong for the state to, because it works against the interest of the gay individual.
No, it works against no. Listen to what you just said. You just said it works against the interest of the individual in a society that mostly is. Hold on a second, dude. No, hold on a second. If you're appealing right now, you're appealing to the minority to make rules for the exception of the behaviors, right? You're trying to protect the exception of the behavior. And you're saying, well, it goes against these two dudes who are living in a Christian culture, right? Who are maintaining their behaviors, right? And you're saying, well, it would be wrong because it's violating X, Y, Z. And yet you don't see from your own perspective, by the way, not even mine, that are the gay couple in this instance causing disharmony, as Adam would call it? Are they causing disharmony among the
all else held equal? It's probably amoral. Like it's not moral, immoral.
I didn't ask that, Adam.
Right, but no. What's causing disharmony here is the ideology of the society that is attempting to jail or punish gay people.
No, it's opposite. It's the opposite.
That is exactly what it is. You would
No, it's
want
the opposite.
What progressivism is attempting to do is rectify it in a way
It's to appeal to the minority.
that maximizes the interests of all.
It doesn't maximize the interests of Christianity, dude. How does that
It maximizes the interests without being a detriment to the.
How does that
common
maximize
interest.
Christian interests?
Yeah, common interest.
How does
and creating a society.
Evan, can I add real quick?
How does it maximize the interest of Christian people?
You would acknowledge that a society that is just, I would say, like accepting of gay people is a more harmonious society than a society that is 99% Christian.
I don't appeal to harmony, bro. That's a feeling.
I know, but you're questioning our worldview.
Yeah, you can't define harmony, bro.
But I'm saying what would be the most harmonious.
You can't even measure what harmony is.
Simply be a way.
You can't tell me even how to measure harmony. It's a fancy word. You don't even know what
removing
you're saying.
social, cultural, political, and economic obstacles such that you're maximizing synergy within society and people's roles in society.
What did I say in my opening? Platitudes upon platitudes, bumper stickers, multiplying, feeling good. You guys can't give me one metric for what's harmony and what's not.
Can you?
Evan, let me add real quick. Just so you guys understand. Being gay itself, it's not something that you're born with, okay? And even if you wanted to take the naturalistic approach, we can get into that. But being gay itself, the way we would see it is the same way as when someone watches porn or when incest is occurring, right, between a dad and a daughter. It's a desire. It's a perversion of the flesh. It's something that they can control. And even if you were to say, hey, I believe incest is wrong and we should punish that, I would ask you why. You would say, well, it's because they're acting on something that even if they are intrinsically born with that they want to act on it, we would still set duties in place to remove that from society as a norm, correct?
In order to remove like what? Pedophilia?
So like incest, like would you guys allow like a 45-year-old dad with a 19-year-old daughter?
Because you would have exploitative there would be exploitative.
How about posthumous sex with a corpse if there was consent? How about posthumous sex with a corpse if the grandma Mildred signed a waiver and said, after I'm dead, people can pay to have harmless sex with my body? Do you jail the company that starts that? Yes or no?
Going back to what you said, I think there'd be a lot more of social pressure and the legal question would you have to iron out like
force? Would you use force to stop legally?
I think that profit seeking can be predatory, and in that sense, it would be predatory.
No. If they consented, it's not predatory, dude.
But people who have a stable.
How is consent predatory? How is consent predatory?
People consent to predatory things all the time. Like, for example,
how is it Grandma Mildred who says, guys, when I'm dead,
it's predatory because based on whatever the profit seeking company does in order to
it's free.
It's free now. Because what it would do is it's
free now. Did you hear me?
50% off.
It's free now.
With the
profit. I just said it's free. Forget profit. It's free. Grandma says, I am signing this waiver. People can have sex with my body after I'm dead, free.
In a vacuous sense,
would you let? Yeah. So you have
in a vacuum.
Got you. So a society of progressives like you two find it that you're arguing today that it's a better society so long as nobody was harmed and nobody was
I've said in the beginning that I don't put hedonism as the end goal. I don't think hedonism in and of itself
I didn't ask for an end
thing.
Goal, dude. I asked if it's permitted and would you use force to stop people from having sex with Grandma Mildred?
Well, in terms of force, that's always going to be an empirical question. Like we would say that like lying is wrong, but we don't necessarily want to use the state to prevent people from lying all the time unless
or having sex with Grandma Mildred
contract or like cheating is wrong, but we don't necessarily enforce that.
Is it wrong to have sex with Grandma Mildred?
I think that there's something psychological.
Definitely indicative of some serious psychological issue. I'll say that much.
What's wrong with that?
If you associate your sexual,
I thought you guys want to be inclusive, right, Adam? You don't include psychologically.
We want to make sure people are psychologically healthy, and I don't think being attracted to corpses is psychologically healthy.
They have preferences,
and those preferences can be shaped by their environment, which is why we want to create an environment that does not create those.
Let me push back on that, Adam. Real quick, you did say that being gay is amoral, correct?
Engaging in gay sex, I said, is amoral.
There's no
amoral. Thing as so it's not within the purview of morality, right?
In a vacuum, yeah.
It's within the purview. It's just not.
I'm sure you could add things to the hypothetical that would.
Yeah.
No, but I'll put it this way, right? So like if I'm amoral about like this headphone case right here, I'm amoral about it. What I'm saying is that there's no moral judgment that we ought to make about this one case. So therefore, if you guys were to take a default position saying that there's this thing isn't moral or immoral or whatever, and I have a view that it is immoral, all I have to do is take a moral position to already outweigh your amoral position. So if I say I don't want to give this headphone case a set of rights, you would really have no contention because it's amoral. It's outside of the purview of morality.
What do you mean outweigh? Because the initial question is about the use of force.
Now you're talking about removing rights, which is another variable.
No, because what I'm saying,
this is important. Gay
Grandma's
sex,
a dead object. Grandma's a dead object.
Because you're saying, wait, gay sex in and of itself is amoral. Now you're asking the question: is it immoral for me to take away the rights of gay people? Of course, we find that immoral. That's a totally different question and an entirely separate variable.
What I'm showing you is that you're taking an amoral position, and then you're letting this amoral position disrupt the flow of society.
Right.
How would two gay people having sex in private disrupt society?
Gay people
how would a 45-year-old dad with a 19-year-old daughter disrupt the flow of society?
The disruption is our society having an ideology that is predicated on caring about stuff like that.
Also, do you think that the impact on society is equal between a gay consenting couple and like an old dad and his young daughter, that they're all else held equal, that these are having the exact same types of impact on society?
Yeah. Would you say that
foundationally, it all comes to perversion of the flesh. So the only justification you guys can give us is that it just feels good as to why one ought to be gay.
And degenerative too. It degenerates against a fabric, right? So incest produces degenerative. It's degenerative. It not only perverts, like Easy said, what you're doing. Degenerative means like in this case, it could be biological. You could say it degenerates. It's actually biological degeneration to procreate with your own family, but it also perverts, right? And so, but also Adam said, hold on a second. Adam also said sex between men. You guys are evolution proponents. I feel like that's just in the basket with progressivism. Are you Evo proponents?
I feel like you didn't answer my question.
What's your question?
You used the word degenerate in your definition of degeneracy. So I'm asking you, what does degeneracy mean?
So away from, let's say, away from God, away from commands, away from morals, away from the fabric that we hold normatively speaking. So even if you had a normative position, said this is the fabric of how we do things, acting away from that fabric would be degenerative.
And how would you know whether or not it's acting away from it? Is it based on
inversion? If it's inversion, for instance, Adam, hold on, I'm explaining. You have to let me answer. Adam said, two guys having sex. That's actually inversion and degenerative. Why? Because you have to lie about what sex is to even say the term two dudes having sex.
Can you define what inversion means? What do you, sorry,
you're flipping something has. Okay, you're flipping something that has a positive established definition, and you're selling a counterfeit of the definition. Sex cannot. You're selling it. Yeah, you're selling that men can have sex. They can't have sex.
You think that?
Are you saying, like, specifically speaking, you wouldn't call it sex?
It's a perversion to call it sex.
Are you saying that sex is necessarily defined?
You can call it like fun time or something. I don't know what the point is. You're trying to make
sex.
Sex.
Define sex. Define sex, please. The act.
Honestly, I don't know what a clear definition would be.
What's the defined?
It would have to do something with satisfying sexual reproductive organs and you have some sort of, I guess, rudimentary flesh desire, and it would be doing that with a consenting adult.
What about an object?
I don't know. I guess that it may be
masturbation. I feel like, but, I mean,
that's masturbation. So is masturbation sex or is it masturbation?
It's masturbation.
Okay, so is sodomy between a man and a man mutual masturbation or sex?
Why does it matter which of those it is?
He asked about degenerative, right?
It would be sex. I'm curious as to what you.
Okay, so can I have sex with a Nintendo cartridge?
I guess.
Okay, great.
Honestly, colloquially though, I would say why are you fucking?
No. If you can have sex, biological, like you're speaking, if you can have sex with a Nintendo cartridge, then you should be able to teach kids in sexual education that that's sex. Are you willing to teach kids that putting their dick in a Nintendo set is sex? Yes or no?
I
Bite
feel
the
as though
bullet.
sex would require more than one person to be
Bite
involved
the
in the
bullet.
acts, and that'd be the distinction between masturbation and sex.
Right.
Well, no,
Just,
no,
just
no,
on that
no,
note,
Adam,
guys, just really quickly. We are going to read out some super chats, and then I just want to keep this going because I think this is good. And by the way, guys, sign up to JimBob's gaming channel. JimBob has a gaming channel that you guys.
I hope the Nintendo cartridge thing was a hypothetical because.
Well, no, Adam. There are people called object sexuals. You know this, right?
Sure,
Yeah.
it makes sense. I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a protected class. They have rights too, right? Let them fuck the bridge.
Yeah, so we're just going to read out a few super chats, guys, then I'm going to keep this going. So Zorchid for $5 says, Evan, is it possible for more progressive choice to be the worst, for the more progressive choice to be the worst choice?
Within the given context or the given time of a particular society, I would say yes. I think at one point it was considered the progressive position to advocate eugenics. And so, but that's I would say that's one of the great things about progressivism is we've adapted in accordance with recognizing that humans are actually more adaptable to their environments. And the best way to resolve for things like poverty isn't to do eugenics against poor people. It's to actually create conditions that enable them to get out of their circumstance.
But don't you agree? Don't you think it's a good path to take to, if someone's living a life and they are just absolutely at their worst and society, their entire experience is terrible. You're saying, well, yeah, eugenesis is, take yourself out. It would be totally moral from your view, right? Or amoral from Adam's view, right?
Again, it would, I think this is sort of more reliant on whatever their psychological health is going to be. Like, for example, yeah. And also it really depends on what the implementation of allowing these things really looks like in society.
Okay.
If allowing means like social encouragement,
yeah,
that's going to be fundamentally different than like the state allowing. That's going to be fundamentally.
I understand. I'm just asking more of a principal question, Evan. The reason I ask that is people say people in horrible situations with pain or agony or even depression, maybe you would give them the allowance to make it legal to off themselves in some sort of fun, controlled way, like those weird delete pods in Switzerland. Now, if it's the case that you justify offing oneself based on torment and the elimination of torment, it's weird that you guys switch that up for the Troons people, because you say society has to change. If you were consistent, you'd say the people who are living a life and their identity is so incompatible with the society they're living in. Wouldn't there be nothing wrong with them self-deleting if it ends their suffering from your own view? Isn't that the consistent position?
I think ideally you'd want to end the suffering by changing like the way that they engage with society. So if someone has mental health issues that are making them want to get in one of those pods, I would say there's probably a lot more options society can exhaust in addressing that than just saying, yeah, go ahead and kill yourself.
But there wouldn't be anything wrong with it. I didn't say like whether or not there might be other options. I'm saying from your view, you might put that on the menu, right?
It may be wrong.
If someone has like a terminal illness or something, then yeah, again, it depends a lot on.
No, a trans person who's like, I can't.
It's wrong insofar as it reflects a societal ill. I would say the ideal that progressivism strives for is to ensure that everybody, it's inclusive in that sense, that everybody is encouraged and is enabled to actually flourish in our society. And so if you have people that aren't flourishing, and if they choose
not
to
everyone, not everyone,
it's wrong in the sense that it's
all right. Let me plow through these. Let me plow through these super chats real quickly, guys. So John Diner for $5 says, we don't hold to human rights being objective. Automatic JimBob L. There's a flurry of these JimBob, so John Diner's going to actually call in, which will be fun.
Sure.
Christian Packard for $10 says, for God did not send his son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. JimBob is trying to condemn people out of his town. Easy is truly trying to represent Christ. Thank you.
Oh no, I'm doing
John Dinan. John Dinan for $10 says, JimBob doesn't get it. We can't say necrophilia is bad because the devil is in the details. John Dinan for $5 says, JimBob L, he used tautology. Degeneracy is what degeneracy is. Ha ha ha. Do you want to respond to any of those three?
Yeah, I appreciate Evan correcting me. I may have used a tautology. What I clarified as saying is that if there's a normative structure, a fabric of customs and behaviors, anything away from that we would consider degenerate, and that's a fair enough clarification. But thanks for pointing out the mistake tautology.
Beaten Cheeks for $5 says, yo, check your Rumble chat. You don't need to read this super chat. Just head over to Rumble. YT censors the other platform. So stupid. Thanks, Beaten Cheeks. Good to see you in the chat. Every day I'm struggling for $5 says, hey, Evan, what's the ontology of logic according to your worldview?
I'm not sure exactly what the question is. Could someone clarify the
like
ontology
what's
of logic?
the nature of logic? Like, where does logic come from, and what is logic?
I think that logic, and this isn't something that's my expertise within philosophy, but I think that logic is broadly going to be our systematic review of empiricism and understanding how that actually functions, and our brain sort of like computing how that functions. So me saying, for example, that broadly when you have one thing and then another thing, it combines and makes two things, and like that's sort of just like a simple math example. But
I think he was asking.
I'm honestly not going to be great at explaining, and nor do I have a comprehensive understanding of.
And I'm going to let you guys get into this. I'm just going to read out one more super chat, and then we're going to go for another 20 minutes or so you guys can talk about whatever comes to mind. But Justin Henley for $5 says, automatic JimBob W, human rights don't exist. Point to the right. All comes down to force. Jake knows. Give a thumbs up, Jake. All right, guys. We're going to go for about 20 more minutes, and then we're going to read out more super.
That's my view. The guy just read my view. I think force exists, right? And duties exist. So the competition for a society is really, we agree force is the arbiter. It's the ultimate arbiter. That's not to say it's correct. It just says it is, right? Force is. So I'm saying that rights don't do the job. Force does the job. And the only question is, who's got the force? Whose ethical view informs the force is a fair enough inquiry.
All right,
Jake, is it possible to go longer than 20 minutes, or is that the cutoff?
No, we can. If it's going longer, I'm just going to leave it. And if any of you guys do any of you guys have a hard out tonight?
Yeah, I have to be gone in probably like 30 minutes. I can push it to. So
you going to do a Nintendo meetup, Adam?
No, it's actually Sony PS5. Yeah,
I do kind of want to finish this Ravens Bills game. I don't know if anyone.
Okay, cool.
Oh no, we're straight.
All right, cool. Well. In that case, if it's half an hour, then I think it's probably best to get into maybe 10 minutes of dialogue, and then we'll read out a few super chats, and then we're going to have a few quick callers. Okay, that sound good? All right.
Can I ask
Easy,
you guys?
You've been very respectful to your partner tonight, so you can start off.
Yeah, I guess I wanted to take more of like a selfish approach just to understand some of the fundamentals as well. So what specific, well, you guys already said that rights aren't innate, right? We as a society construct the rights.
I would say so. I don't know necessarily if Adam would agree, but I would say that largely rights are going to be a social and legal construction that we create to protect the interests of individuals.
Okay, so like if we say that women have the right to vote, that's a societal construct that could change tomorrow if we came up with it, right?
Theoretically, yes, we could take away rights, like we took away the right to have an abortion. So currently, that's not a right in the United States.
Okay, so if eventually we came to a point where removing the rights from women to vote produced a better result for society, would you guys be okay with that?
It depends what you mean by better result.
Under your view, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. You can ask.
I was going to say, by your own system, if it turned out that women, if you remove the right for them to vote, and suddenly they were like, well, what do we do? Because we have no collective authority and women can't collectively overpower men. So ultimately everything's left to men, which is why the patriarchy is here to stay and can never be defeated. Easy's asking a question. If women were the voting mechanism was removed from women and it actually led them back to being at home, producing children, taking care of children, and raising good people for society, multiplying society in a productive way. If it was the case that the outcomes from women not voting, but rather focusing on the family and producing great people, if that were the case, if you just granted it, you guys, you'd be totally fine in the outcome. It would have nothing to do with.
I think the exclusionary nature of what you're suggesting would be, by definition, putting up socio-political roadblocks towards women behaving in society in accordance with the maximum aperture of freedom to carry out.
Yeah, but Adam, but the problem is, when you point to exclusionary, how is it not exclusionary? I know, but why is it exclusionary if they have to rely wholly on the collection of men to protect their rights? That's exclusionary.
Are you assuming that all these women now just don't want the right to vote either, and they're like, we're willingly going to vote it away?
No, you missed what I said. You're arguing against exclusionary. You want inclusionary. How is it fair?
Force,
I got you. But how is it fair that the state force is primarily and wholly dependent on males, not women? Isn't that a disparity under your view and not harmony?
Are you talking about there being like more men than women in the military? What do you mean by that?
No,
he's
saying that women get the right to vote away the men's right. So like, for example, men are obligated to sign up for the draft, and women are the ones that are actively able to vote against or for that. So they get to decide if a man has to die in war for them or not.
But they can't collectively defend their own rights. So that's the point. Is I'm Adam. You're actually. That's why I argue. I haven't fully fleshed out. Maybe you guys, the progressives, can help me with my own argument. Is if you advocate for rights, but you advocate for equality, it's a performative contradiction because you need men wholly, collectively, the force applicator for protecting women's rights, also men's rights, but. Specifically, women could never use force collectively and take over and change rights, right? So Evan said, oh crap, we had the right to abortion and now it's gone. So it's not innate, it's not inherent. But how did you do that? Well, with the threat of force, right? That's the threat. Another way of putting it, Adam and Evan, I want your take on this. Would you agree that a man voting is the act of forfeiting his attempt to collectivize force against the government? He's actually trading a vote instead of rising up. Is that fair?
I'll grant that. For what are you trying to get to?
Instead of the man taking action into his own hands and attacking.
Easy said. Instead of taking it into his own hands and getting people and going, we're going to rise up and start this counter militia or whatever. By voting, they're actually participating in the act of outsourcing the monopoly of force to the state. Is that
if you choose to frame it that way? Yes. I would just say that I don't think most people conceive or think about voting in the way. I think people engage with democracy very differently.
I understand, but I don't think there's anything inconsistent with the description. The reason I described it that way is if a man is trading his ability to use force in the here now and in exchange for the state monopoly of force by voting, I would ask you, what is a woman trading?
Why does
do you think that something has to be traded?
And also, you could say that you could say that they also are trading in the same way that the man is.
What are they saying?
But not as a collection.
Rise up. How does a woman? How does a collection of women rise up? What do they gossip?
Right.
What do they gossip?
But
social pressure. He knows it.
Wait. Please let me explain my point. The woman would be trading, for example, their ability to rise up with their given community. So you're arbitrarily maligning it based on gender, but we could do this with any sort of.
Wait, what do you mean by rise up, though, Evan?
Wait. You could do this with any sort of social category. So like, are all 18 to for example, 30-year-olds trading their right to have the ability to rise up and have.
What is a rise up? You keep using this term rise up. How do women rise up aside from starting Pinterest?
You could, I mean,
rise up. Tell me.
We exist in the modern world.
I mean, you said yourself, there's other things besides force that can influence society, like social pressures, right? So,
Adam, that's changing the goalposts. I'm not saying there aren't ways in which women could manipulate society and influence society. I'm saying ultimately rights, though, aren't reliant on those. Would you agree? It's reliant ultimately on the threat of force. If you violate a right, here's a man with a gun or a collection of men with a gun. In practical terms,
sure. That's just monopoly.
I'm asking Evan, what does rise up mean for women? Please tell me.
In terms of if you want to say in the most rigid explanation, which is literally the rise up and threat of violence, that can
women violence,
not necessarily as women as a collective from men, because we can acknowledge their men, broadly speaking, are going to be physically stronger than them. And
rise up against who then?
That wouldn't function in practice.
Rise up against who then?
Wait, please let me finish.
I'm just saying. I'm sorry to interrupt, but
please let
me. It's
a
lot. It's a lot. You're saying
it is a lot. I know it's like.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'll let you finish. I'm sorry.
But your categorization of it being women against men is just fundamentally arbitrary, because nobody actually engages. I don't engage with my political system as a man. Am I forfeiting my ability with respect to the dichotomy between men and women? It could be any sort of dichotomy. Me as a white man, am I forfeiting my ability to just rise up and have dominance and be able to subjugate ethnic or racial minorities? Because theoretically, any sort of racial or ethnic majority also has that ability. Are they quote unquote forfeiting right. My point is that your categorization of making that your engagement with the political system as being a part of this specific social category is arbitrary. It could be any social category.
Is force arbitrary?
Very metric.
Is force arbitrary?
In like a abstract sense?
No, in an empirical.
I don't know what you mean.
In reality, force, is that arbitrary, or is it groups of men with muscle and better equipment using force and saying, I'm moving you physically from point A to point B. I'm physically stopping you. So when you say women rise up, I'm still wondering what you're referring to. Hold on. What are they rising up against?
The force of, I don't know.
Here, I'll ask you different. Evan, I'll ask you differently. I'll ask you differently. Do you guys think that with enough manpower we can take down the patriarchy?
I don't know what that means.
Do you want to take down the patriarchy or not? Because that's progressive, right?
By taking down the patriarchy, you mean like dismantling oppressive ideas about the way the gender dynamics work?
So there is oppression.
I don't think that. No, I don't think that men just like as a collection can come together and
by saying oppression, you're admitting that there's disparity between men and women in regard to force. So that's why I asked.
That is not the implication.
Yes, it is. How can you oppress someone without force?
There are disparities that are due to, for example, just societal and social pressures that have nothing to do with force.
Yeah, so that's secondary causation, Evan.
Huh?
That's secondary.
Being
that's
oppressed,
downstream.
that's a secondary causation, meaning that the primary is the ability to have force, adequate force, and also the ability to have systems and organizations to keep.
So are you guys just asking if on average men are more physically strong than women?
No. That's
not only that.
Yeah, but that's true. But what we're saying collectively to argue, this all started from me saying, do you guys believe in equal rights and all this stuff? And you say, yes, equality, right? Above all, I'm saying that from that paradigm, you organizing a society, by the way, Evan, you even saying society, does that imply force exists? Yes or no?
No.
Okay. So you can have a society.
You can have a society without a state.
But force, I would call force the state. So let's say you have a group of people and you call it a society. If it's a society that has distinct identity, that means it's not this other society, right? And it's maintaining its identity over time. If there are societies with laws and order, which we all agree is good, right? Just generally speaking, not even morally good, just it's pragmatic.
We agree with a state. And
I'm saying that the egalitarian fantasy has a performative contradiction because of what me and Easy are saying here is that an ordered society, it presupposes and requires a disparate allocation and use of force between men and women. So you can't have an equal society. Why? Because a society requires maintenance, force, threat of force, and you guys should just concede this.
This is like such a weird implication because you're attempting to suggest that, and this is even something we can acknowledge that there's going to be even disparate abilities to enact force between men, right? But because of that doesn't necessarily delineate justifications for other forms of disparities between those groups. So just because, for example, white people have some collective theoretical authority to have an oversee amount of force over particular minority groups, that doesn't necessarily entail, and it would be a non sequitur to suggest though that morally would justify any sort of
we're not making any prescriptors.
No, we're just saying descriptive, Evan. We're not saying ought or justification. We're just saying
I don't know what the purpose of this line of questioning.
The purpose is, go ahead.
Even when you point to the white men with the black men, and there's a disparities there, we're still gonna have to, as a prescriptor, admit that white men have been able to, number one, have the force, number two, be able to structure and organize, and be able to actually uphold the power for thousands of years now, or however long it's been. So even that, you would still kind of be proving our point, but this time we're doing it within the categories of men and women.
And what we're saying, Evan, is that ultimately, if you say something should be corrected, right, and you say it should be corrected through policy, right, are you not also saying we need adequate force to uphold the policy that we determine is just?
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean, not everything is corrected through policy.
Just bite the bullet for both of you. Descriptively, it's the case. There's no reason. It's not controversial. You're not going to get attacked by, maybe you'll get attacked by leftists. Just say it's descriptively true that an ordered society with law can't fully embody an egalitarian status, because the organization of the society itself with law requires men collectively to be in a position that women can't be in a position of. It's already disparate.
Because that's a misunderstanding or a diagnosis of what egalitarianism egalitarianism is, because it's not a there's nothing about egalitarianism that necessarily suggests there can't be a disparate ability to enforce things based on different
Can I put it in a way that you guys would understand it better?
Sure.
Do you guys I'm assuming that within progressivism the strive is for egalitarianism, right? Having equality. You guys said evening out the injustices, correct?
Again, it depends what you mean by egalitarianism and equality. It's not absolute equality across all facets.
Okay, so let's put it
people.
Right, let's put it this way. So are men
certain avenues, yeah.
Okay, and would you guys say that men are the main perpetrators of violence and rape when it comes to women?
Statistically, I'm pretty sure that's uncontroversial, yeah.
What
Okay.
if the woman?
And
What if the
it's-
woman's a man? Gotcha. Go ahead.
But okay, so then my question would be, why don't the women just defend themselves? Like, if I wanted to go and grape John Jones, would I be able to do so, or would he kill me with his bare hands?
I mean, you picked an interesting UFC fighter.
You might actually be.
He's the
You
best,
might
though,
actually-
isn't he? Isn't he still the
You
best?
might
I
actually
thought
be
Islam Makhachev
stronger.
is getting up
Yeah.
there, but
Oh, okay.
You might actually be stronger than him, so I'm not sure if that's the case, but I'm pretty sure if you actually account for rape that happens in prisons, male on male rape is statistically even higher. So there are cases in which men can't defend against themselves, and a lot of that has to do. But a lot of that has to do with the way that humans coordinate amongst each other, and this is sort of my point.
Okay.
It's a misunderstanding to frame things between
No.
the dichotomy of men and women, because men and women both coordinate in a coordinated fashion to
Yes.
To collectively endorse things like
Right.
the state as a mechanism of force.
Right. So what I'm leading to is that what's going to happen is that men are the perpetrators of violence, and a lot of progressives and liberals are going to say that men are oppressing women. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to appeal to other men that are actually guided by a moral compass that can not let them enact toxic masculinity, but it can let them act on masculinity with a moral compass, which is what's necessary. So that's why we argue that Christianity by millions of miles is superior to progressivism, because not only do we have the adequate force, we have the moral compass, but we also have an objective purpose that we're striving for. Whereas with you can't account for the inequalities or injustices, and you can't even enforce them.
We also
Response, guys, then we're going to get into quick response, and then we're going to get into super chats.
we also reflect that.
All right, wait,
one more
you
thing to
don't
add.
you
I'll
don't
let you
have the
respond.
adequate force. How are you ever going to enforce Christianity on non-Christian countries?
What?
Because we believe in
You don't have the benefit of force on your side.
No, the thing is, even if you didn't get there, I want to add to Easy what he's saying is that if it's descriptively true that reality itself, descriptively, we're not making an ought claim, descriptively that it's hierarchical, and we've demonstrated it's patriarchal. That is to say, there is a top-down system that we're looking at, right? That even you Evan saying, well, we showed that men also dominate other men in prison. Yeah, that's to our point. That means that there's a hierarchy. We're arguing that the Christian paradigm actually better accounts for and reflects that hierarchy. We admit that force wins. The only question is which paradigm can adequately use the force and apply their ethical system in a way that's consistent, continuous, something that can be fine-tuned and whatnot. We're arguing from your position, Evan and Adam, there really is no correct way. If we gave you guys the guns, all of them, right, and you said we're going to use force now to implement what you guys called the peak of harmoniousness. Is that a word? Is harmonious?
I think by definition, if we use those means, it kind of defeats the definition
So,
we give. But
however, if it defeats it, then you admit that a harmonious progressive society would still rely on inequality because of this force doctrine.
I don't think hierarchies are inherently a bad thing. I think you have to be specific with which hierarchy you're talking about and what it's built based upon. And what we're arguing against is hierarchies that are not, I guess, beneficial or helpful or really have any rhyme or reason behind them.
Equality is a myth.
Want to remove economic obstacles, social, political
equality is a
obstacles.
myth. Say, Adam, equality is a myth.
Depending on how you
Say
define
it.
everything is a myth. I mean,
Well, yeah, I mean,
Adam-
it's a straw man. I think it's just a straw man to suggest that committing ourselves to egalitarianism means that we will necessarily always be able to achieve inequality. We recognize that there are certain, characteristics, variety amongst individuals, both through gender and the way that even just like personal capabilities. But that's not.
We're not straw manning, Evan.
Nothing about acknowledging that in no way is like
No.
contradictory to the values, because what I'm getting at is this line of questioning is just forcing us to acknowledge certain descriptive realities, but that has nothing to do with the normative values that we're advocating for, which is fundamentally going to be coordination amongst people who have varying capabilities
With force.
and that coordination is what fundamentally gets you things like the state and
With force. Right.
But the point is that you
this
guys
is a good
don't.
place to go to the last
Cooperation, you're saying.
we've got to move it on, guys. I'm really sorry because Adam does have a out quite soon. So, guys,
I
there
do
is a
have one
poll
quick
up
question
in
I
the
want to
chat.
ask
We're
before
going to
I
see.
go, but go ahead.
Yeah, we're just going to read a few super chats, and then we're going to actually have a few callers. So we've got about 15, 20 more minutes, if that's okay, Adam. Just quickly, guys, I'm going to read some super chats. The poll is up in the chat, guys. Go and get your vote in now so we can see the final results of who changed more minds today. Beaten Cheeks for $10 says, what's good morally in society can left ideology bring when the Skittles communities are butting each other and not creating any life, and the T's are cutting off their own privates? Not going to get any answers for these ones, guys. Beaten Cheeks for $10 says, genuinely wondering, with these leftist ideologies and with the Great White Hope taking office tomorrow, would you guys move to Venezuela and embrace your political views? They'd welcome you with open arms. And then we have got Frank J says, tribute to the King of Australia. Thank you very much, my friend. I appreciate that. And Beaten Cheeks for $50 says, I haven't shown you enough love lately. You're still one of my boys, JimBob. JimBob,
Hey, what's up?
you're one of
What's up,
Beaten Cheeks' boys.
Thank you, Beaten
All right,
Cheeks.
guys.
Thanks for a big super chat, buddy.
I want a quick, you can take less than 2 minutes if you want, but a quick, super fast closing from you guys. We're going to start with Adam, then Easy, then Evan, then JimBob. So Adam, real quick closing statements, and then we'll get into some callers.
Sure. So this was actually my first time debating this topic. I found it thoroughly entertaining and I think informative on both sides. I'm glad. I think we largely engaged in good faith, although I think there were some points where we were kind of talking past each other that inhibited our ability to kind of get to more of a consensus, at least on understanding what we mean by each other's definitions. With that being said, I mean, I don't have much else to add. Someone brought up John Jones, so I want to leave with a completely unrelated question and ask, who are your guys' top 3 active UFC fighters right now?
I'm out of the loop. Sorry.
Oh, damn.
Islam
Missing out.
Makhachev, John
Perez,
Jones, and then Tom Aspinall.
Okay.
Yeah.
Valid.
Yeah.
All right,
And Jake
Easy. You
Rattlesnake,
got
too.
one. Go
Jake
for it.
Rattlesnake also.
Yeah, I would
wish.
say, guys, as the closing, it was pretty obvious that even if we were to take the position that Christianity is up to interpretation from certain denominations, we still have an objective standard of truth by which we can appeal to. Whereas with progressivism, if there are different interpretations, that's not a contradiction within your guys' worldview. So our point is that if rights don't inherently exist, but duties do, Christianity not only provides the adequate duties, the force, and they require a patriarchal system, which is going to govern everything, given with a good moral compass. So that's where I think you guys just lacked on that part. But overall, it was a really fun debate, and I do have a lot of respect for you guys for coming on this
Evan.
channel.
Yeah, I had a fun debate. I think fundamentally, even amongst Christianity, there's going to be the various interpretations. And like I mentioned earlier, the overall reliance on things like these universal, interests or desires amongst society in a coordinated fashion is why we advance things even amongst Christians. And that's exactly what progressivism is all about. And I don't think we ever, got into empirics, but I think that it's quite clear that societies that by and large are, thriving both economically and in terms of their overall satisfaction, even with maybe some of the metrics that these Christians would deem as being valuable, are incredibly secular. And so you can have secular societies, you can have societies of all sorts of religions, and flourish as need be. So it's not actually the case, and we have that to show that Christianity is a necessity for a beneficial society.
All right, JimBob. Then we got another caller, and guys,
Okay.
Josh Gerald has said that if we get the super chat goal, we will get 20 memberships randomly gifted for all of you in the chat. So let's
All
get
right.
that goal, guys.
All right. Well, thanks for coming. You guys were really actually fun to engage with. Thanks for that. I think establishing Well, what's good for society? It doesn't need a standard for what's better. I don't think that anyone could take the word harmonious and be like, oh, yeah, I know what you mean. I think that's lacking in your guys' worldview, that if you were to actually pursue that as the standard, you're going to have to tell me, pointing to one circumstance, something disharmonious, something that is harmonious. Like I said in my opener, progressivism ironically uses the word progress, but can't tell you where they're going. Adam even admitted that it's out there. We're discovering it. We don't know what it is. It's there. It's an asymptote. It's 99.99999. It's not yet at the one. I told him he doesn't even have the one. At least with a one, you can point to it. Are we almost there? I'm saying, Adam, you don't have a there. It's utopia. The definition of it is nowhere. That's what progressivism is. Nowhere. I think we've established that in regards to cohesion, Christianity wins. In regards to duties that ultimately need to supersede rights and entitlements, Christianity wins. Family-oriented reproduction, progressivism allows for reproductive dead ends for no reason, just because it's inclusive. Christianity, because of its bigotry and ability to remove what's not cohesive, I think is more successful than progressivism. I don't think progressivism has any legs. It's basically like a little castle made of sand that every couple generations, based on the norms and the trends of the time, the wave comes in, washes all the sand away, and then the new progressives come and go, this is progressivism today, even though they couldn't possibly agree with the year before. With that, again, I want to definitely thank Jake for having us all. I thought this was a fruitful debate, not just because we're debating progressives, but you guys were actually really good sports and you're able to at least communicate with us. And so thanks for coming.
Yeah, I thought it was really good as well. And I caught Evan on a few Jubilee debates and I was pretty impressed by what you were doing there. So thanks for coming on. Guys, just quickly, the results. So what's better for society? The first poll was Christianity 92%, progressivism in 2%, and I'm undecided 6%. And this time it was Christianity 91%, I'm undecided 6%, and progressivism 1%. So I think a few more people just went to the I'm undecided camp, and a few people left both camps. So you guys actually ruined both of your own causes.
I would forcefully remove those people.
We got James Lindsay here, guys. James Lindsay wants to say a few things.
I'm James Lindsay. JimBob, you're woke, right? Boo.
Whatever, James.
I'm joking.
You turtle.
Anyways, Evan, thanks for coming on. You too, Adam. I have a question for Evan. You mentioned empiricism as one of your bases for progressivism.
Yeah, I would say that empiricism is largely going to inform the debate amongst people and encouraging what exactly decisions society makes moving forward.
I guess my first question from that is, what do you define by empiricism? Like, are you talking about like the scientific consensus, for example?
I mean, not necessarily. I mean, scientific consensus is just like those experts and their understanding of what the data actually suggests. But empiricism itself is going to be a method of observation, and then ideally, you would also want to use, I guess, more high level research methods to ensure you're controlling for enough variables and figuring out what exactly causes what, et cetera.
Yeah. So would you say just this might seem unrelated, but it'll be tied back in. What do you think about like evolution? Do you think that's true then?
I think the evolution, yeah. I mean, if you just take evolution, the theory of evolution, just to be that, selection accounts primarily for what is going to be reproductively beneficial. I think it's obvious that as soon as traits have some sort of randomized variation, the traits that are best able to be reproduced and pass those genes on down are.
So Christians are more fit than progressives then.
What's the argument?
Because we reproduce. Yeah, we reproduce more and more effectively. Than you guys.
Yeah, that's basically the argument.
But Christianity is on the decline. So the trait of actually, it is at least in this nation. I can't.
What did that make? What did that mean? You guys are in decline because you guys want to have less kids, and every chance you get to have kids, you abort them.
I don't I don't think that that's the case.
Well,
but-
All right, I appreciate the question,
let's riddle
James
that kid.
Lindsay.
Okay.
Last little bit, man. Then we got to move it on.
James Lindsay sucks. Not
Sure,
you.
sure,
though.
sure, sure. Okay, yeah. So my question then is obviously if natural selection selects for the best traits, wouldn't it then imply just inequality is just natural for all life forms, including humans?
No, I think you're fundamentally misunderstanding. I don't ascribe the word best trait as being like normatively a good thing. It could be the case that natural selection could pass down things that aren't necessarily normatively beneficial. So for example, there's examples in which like certain societies have different variabilities or are more likely to develop certain diseases, but at one time that was naturally beneficial, but at this time it isn't. I guess
but then the people who survive, who have the traits that are able to survive those diseases, are going to be able to survive those diseases, and those are going to be passed down. That then just still leads back to the original question. Like, this implies inequality is natural. So why are you trying to promote progressivism, which promotes something that's not natural and goes against evolution?
That would be an appeal to nature. I don't think that.
Why is appeal to nature bad?
So yeah, well, an appeal to nature is bad because normally we don't ascribe things as being natural, as being fundamentally good. We can think of a ton of things in this world that are natural that we would not necessarily ascribe as being good. Rape is found
why
within society, and we don't find that to be morally good. So yeah, it's all going to come
down
to
from
all right, guys. I have to move this on. My stream is glitching out.
Okay.
I can't even. My Wi-Fi is super slow at this Best Western Plus. So
okay.
I get to move it on with James Lindsay. I appreciate you coming through, brother.
Yep.
All right.
Thanks for answering my question.
Take care. All right, and we have got Glink60 down here. Glink60. I can't really see you, but let's hope that you're not sus. What's happening? What's your question for?
So blurry.
A little bit.
What app is
You're
that?
muted
You're
there,
muted.
Glink60.
Oh, my camera is a little bit messed up at the moment, but I wanted to kind of piggyback off the last point they were making about the reproduction and Christianity being on the decline. I would just like to point out that Christianity is not on the decline because of reproductive means. It is on the decline because of high conversion rates. Those high conversion rates are from generally Protestant churches, which are predominantly liberal and progressive leaning, as well as you can go look at any denomination of Christians. The more liberal sects are going to have the lowest birth rates. You can go within the Catholic denomination. Your Latin Mass Catholics, highly religious, highly traditional, the anti-gay, women being in the kitchen, those kind. They have birth rates of upwards of 3.6. The liberal Catholics. So my question is basically how do you, like, you're kind of dancing around the whole reproductive question. How is progressivism good when it kind of leads to reproductive dead ends?
I don't think progressivism necessarily leads to reproductive dead ends. I think that's just like a natural consequence of economic development. But I think it's important to note.
No.
Wait, can you let me finish? Okay.
Go ahead.
What I was responding to with that previous question is the person before made an inference that because Christians reproduce more and because evolution selects for, quote, the best value, which I don't believe because that's a normatively loaded term, then it must be the case that Christianity is the best value. But even according to that own worldview, if Christianity is on the decline, whatever that explanation may be, that's clearly a sign that it's not going to be the best value in terms of what people actually believe. Because even if you're born into a Christian household, if you just develop secular beliefs later in life, kind of like myself and like a lot of people are nowadays, then it's not actually a testament to how stable or solid the ideology is convincing other people.
I'm sorry, I'm not actually sure what you're even saying here. You're just kind of appealing to Christians leaving the faith again. I'm not really, and then you also use.
I'm just saying it negates the argument that the last guy brought in. The implication that the last dude brought in was that because Christians reproduce more and because evolution selects for reproductive values, that Christianity must be the best value. But if we're just defining evolution as whatever traits are being passed down, it's not that Christianity is being passed down because people are becoming less Christian. It's just that Christians, the people, reproduce more.
Yes, but what you have to understand, Evan, is it wouldn't ultimately matter which one is better. It's the fact that Christians can fulfill the precondition to better itself. So we're at least able to procreate, whereas you guys can't.
Christianity is up
All right,
1% worldwide. Also,
Evan,
Evan, you did say just real quick, Jake. Evan, you said it's because of economic reasons. Do you mean that people are having less kids because of economic, technological reasons? Because I don't think that's true on net balance. Maybe in the modern world, you could say, oh, modernity snuck in and people don't want kids because they're living a totally fine life doing what they're doing. But on net balance, I think it's the poorest countries who are also religious who have the most kids.
Religious, but notice
It's
how
not economic, right?
Well, that's exactly what it is. It's economic. It's not Christianity. And notice what you just did there.
Uh-huh.
You said religious.
Sure.
It's also going to be the case that poor communities in Hindu India are also having a lot of kids because they don't have the same like level of economic development as, let's say, for example, their neighbors in the north, like China.
But then aren't you
All right,
admitting
guys, I'm going to
that-
get off to the next question now. We've got one more coming in. Glink60, thank you very much, man. I appreciate you coming in tonight. Thanks, dude. And we have got Jay Smiksky. Well, if you unmute yourself, bro, what is your question and who is it for?
All right, brother. Well, I'll correct you for my name. My name is Jay Smoke, but I understand that mess up. I got a question for JimBob.
So,
do you think the rampant trans ideology and gay shit going on is a threat to Christianity?
No, because I would hold a very strict view of Christianity from an Orthodox position. It's not a threat to Orthodox Christianity. However, it's a threat to Western society because what's happening is progressive, quote, lowercase Christianity is adopting homosexuality as some sort of like be nice Christianity, include all of them, give them their rainbow vestments. I think it's a threat more to societal norms than it is to Christianity. Christianity cannot fall. The gates of hell will not prevail.
I was just asking because I like all the churches around me. They just always preach that acceptance stuff. Like a lot of gay people going to my churches. I don't fuck with it.
Yeah, that's enlightenment bullshit.
Yep.
All right.
Well, that's
cool.
all I
Thanks,
really
Jay
had.
Smoke. Appreciate it, brother.
All right.
And you take care.
You.
All right,
guys.
fellas.
I do gotta hop
been a
off now,
good,
by the way,
productive
but-
debate. Yeah, man. All good. We are all finished up. So I just want to say thanks
Adam
again
and
for
Evan,
everyone for coming on. And
are
you
you
guys
guys in
are always
California?
welcome back on the channel.
I am.
I'm in Michigan.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Adam, top 3 UFC fighters before you go. Who are they?
Active
Yeah.
or of all time? Ilya Topuria, Islam Makhachev, and either Pereira or Aspinall, one of those two.
Pereira, Aspinall, Jones. Yeah, that's a good shout. All right, fellas. Yeah. I appreciate you all. I'm going to let you all go now, and we'll do this again at some point, I'm sure, even if it's a different panel.
Jake, I have a question.
You can stay on then, JimBob.
Am I staying? If I dual stream, I'm dual streaming. If you stop your stream,
I'm just going to drop you because I know Adam and Evan, you guys want to head off.
Sorry,
I'm going to drop you guys
thanks,
now,
Adam.
but I appreciate that.
Yeah, so does that mine continue automatically, or do you have to start a new one to like do a little chat with my chat? Do you know?
I am not sure.
Okay, well, I guess we'll find out.
I'm not too sure. Yeah. How'd you guys find it?
I thought it was great. I actually thought they were way more easy to engage with than I was predicting. I thought, for the most part, what you see TikTok and everywhere else, it's just unbearable. So I thought they received easy and my aggression perfectly fine. Like I actually think that was a fun debate. Those two is like I feel like we could debate a lot of different topics with those two and have a fun thing. They're way more stable. You know what I mean?
That's
They're
why I
more
chose
stable.
them, because I saw Evan debated a few different topics on Jubilee, and I thought he held his own in every single one. So it's kind of cool, even though like we disagree with them. It is cool to have those sorts of guys coming up and doing debating on the scene, because it does make for fun debates. You know, we can sort of flesh these issues out. Easy, first formal debate. How did you go? Was it different to your sort of shit throwing on the street and getting assaulted by Karens and stuff?
No, yeah, it was great. I think we had JimBob and me were preparing before, so we had so many different angles that we could have taken. That the only thing I wish is it was like 4 hours long, because we did have so many topics that we could go over. But it was fun. They were good faith, and I have respect for people like that come on these kind of channels. And unlike people like Dean and Parker, they run away. So I respect people like that.
Yeah, and they weren't emotional. Dean and Parker, a lot of these younger guys are so emotional.
Yeah.
These guys are like, they laughed at some of my what would otherwise be inappropriate jokes, even. Like, you know, that's good news.
Yeah. No, I liked it. I thought it was pretty fun. And we'll try and do another team up. But yeah, thanks, boys. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Jake.
Thanks so much for having me, Jake. And see you guys
JimBob.
later. Thanks. Easy. We'll talk in a bit, okay?
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, later.
All right. Take it easy, guys. See you later. Alrighty, guys. Another week of debates down. I don't have one lined up for next week just yet, but we do have a few options in there. There's a few things that are sort of on the burner that we're going to see if we can get done. I'm traveling for the next few days. Going to be in Miami for a little bit, and then going to West Virginia to do Tim Pool's show in a few days, which will be a bit of fun, and then off to Michigan. So going to try and get some things going, guys. I appreciate all the support tonight. Really, really appreciate it. Got a few more super chats in here to read. Joe Clark for $5 says Christianity is up worldwide 1.08%. Worldwide for 24. I didn't even know that. I have to check that out. And Jonathan Dinan said $5, aka James Lindsay. JimBob ran from James Lindsay. L. John, you've been given JimBob L's all night, my brother. All right, guys. Well, that's about all I've got for you tonight. Until the next one, I will see you guys later. And till next time, it's Jake, Rattlesnake TV, keeping you armed and dangerous.